Okay, folks, I'm going to call the meeting to order. As required under the Planning Act, a public meeting is being held prior to the committee making a decision on these applications. First, I will start by introducing the Committee of Adjustment. I'm Mr. Robertson. We have Councillor Yeo. We have Mr. Strangway, Ms. Richardson, Ms. Archer, Mr. Erickson, and remotely we have Ms. Scar. Welcome, everyone. All righty. Staff in person, we have the Manager of Planning, Ms. Berry. We have Mr. Lahi, the Secretary Treasurer. Planner 2, Ms. Evans. Planner 2, Ms. Peck. And our Recording Secretary, Ms. Crockford. And remotely, we have staff. The Chief Building Official is Ms. Murchison. And the Plans Examiner, Mr. McKinnon. So welcome everyone, and welcome to the members of the public. All right. Are there any comments or questions with respect to the printed agenda? Being none, can I get a motion to put the agenda on as printed? Mr. Strangway, Mr. Erickson. Any further comments or questions? All those in favor? And that carries. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? All right, being none. The minutes of the last meeting, comments or questions? All right, can I get a motion to put that on the floor? Ms. Richardson, do I have a seconder? Seconder, Mr. Erickson. All right, any further comments or questions? And Ms. Scar, I would ask, seeing as how you're remote, if you'd give us your hand there when I'm looking at as quickly as you would. I'd appreciate that when we're looking for motions and that sort of thing. All right, so everyone in favor of the minutes is printed. There we go. All right, that carries. Thank you. All right, for the information of everyone that's here and online, the committee will hear comments, gather information, and may ask questions to clarify statements made. The committee may ask and answer questions or redirect questions to the appropriate person. Please note that any information or comments given to the committee during this meeting, they're considered evidence. We will first hear from staff, and then the applicant or his or her agent. We will then hear from any person in support of or from those who have questions, concerns, or are opposed to the application. Finally, the applicant or his or her agent will have an opportunity to respond to any of the statements made to the committee. If you wish to speak, for those folks that are here, please raise your hand, and I will acknowledge that. Anyone online that wishes to speak, when you come on the screen, I would ask that you give us your name. We'll afford everyone 10 minutes to make the presentations. No one has ever needed 10 minutes, but we will afford you that. If you find you just can't possibly get all your information in within that 10 minutes, then I will ask the committee if they would perhaps give you a couple of more minutes as an extension. That's never happened, and I don't expect that'll be the case today. Anyway, moving right along, we're dealing with file number, well, I'll read them. D20-2023-006, D03-2021-015, D03-2021-016, and D03-2021-017. This is 626 Drum Road, Geographic Township of Members. Ms. Evans, you're on.
Thank you. Yes, the subject property being 626 Drum Road is designated rural settlement under the City of Kawartha Lakes Oak Ridges Moraine Policy Area and is zoned rural residential type 1 zone under the Oak Ridges Moraine zoning bylaw 2005-133. The subject property is located on the western edge of the rural settlement of Pontypool at the intersection of Drum Road and Highway 35. The property is approximately 2.58 hectares in size and currently contains 3 single detached dwellings, a detached garage, and a corrugated steel shed. The sketch that was included with the application does indicate that there is a second shed on the property, but upon completing the site visit and then speaking with the property owner, it was confirmed that that shed has been removed. The purpose of the application is to facilitate the severance of the property to create 3 new residential lots with 1 retained residential lot. The sketch provided by the applicant divides the property into parts, being part 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and I will be referring to the lots in this way throughout the presentation. Parts 2 to 5 will be severed as individual lots, while Part 1 will be deeded to the Ministry of Transportation. As there are multiple lots and several different buildings that require reliefs, I have given the sketch a legend that gives each building its own color. An amendment to the report is required, as it is stated that 3 of the lots need relief from the minimum frontage required by the zoning bylaw, but in fact only 1 of the lots, the retained lot, which is part 5 on the sketch, requires relief from this provision. Relief is also required to recognize existing non-complying setbacks, to recognize an existing dwelling that does not comply with the required minimum dwelling size, to permit an accessory structure to remain on a lot without a primary use, and to permit the enlargement of an existing non-conforming dwelling. Relief is required under sections 45(1) and 45(2) of the Planning Act. As stated in the provincial policy statement, in rural areas, rural settlement areas shall be the focus of growth and development, and their vitality and regeneration shall be promoted. Additionally, when directing development in rural settlement areas, planning authorities shall give consideration to rural characteristics, the scale of development, and the provision of appropriate service levels. As per the servicing hierarchy, where municipal or communal services are not available, planned, or feasible, individual on-site services may be used provided that site conditions are suitable for the long-term provision of such services with no negative impacts. In settlement areas, private services may be used for infilling and the minor rounding out of existing development. The growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe states that new multiple lots or units for residential development will be directed to settlement areas. When reviewing proposed consents within the Oak Ridges Moraine, the policies of the Oak Ridges Moraine Conservation Plan, or ORMCP, apply. Section 14 of the ORMCP allows for municipalities in the eastern portion of the Oak Ridges Moraine to permit additional residential development in the countryside designation, including rural settlements. And logical responsible infilling can be contemplated that does not rely on the extension of municipal services. Now moving into the reliefs that are required through the variance. On the slides, I have indicated which proposed lot we are looking at, and have included the relevant portion of the sketch with the colors assigned to each existing building found on that part, and the photos are outlined in the color assigned to that building. Part 5 is the retained lot, and it contains a single detached dwelling and a detached garage. Relief is required from section 13.2b, as the required minimum lot frontage is 38 meters, and the proposed lot frontage is 26.03 meters. Section 13.2f, as the minimum side yard setback is 3 meters, and the existing side yard setback for the single detached dwelling, shown in red on the sketch, is 1.8 meters. And section 5.1b4, as the required front yard setback for a detached garage, which is shown in yellow on the sketch. When a detached garage is located in the front yard, the required front yard setback is 15 meters, and the existing setback is 0.61 meters. Moving along to part 4, this lot contains 2 single detached dwellings, and relief is required from section 13.2c, as the required minimum front yard setback is 15 meters, and the existing setback for the dwelling represented in blue is 3.14 meters, and the existing setback of the dwelling represented in pink is 6.93 meters. Additionally, relief is required from section 13.21, as the minimum dwelling unit size is 100 square meters, and the existing dwelling represented in blue is 82 square meters in size. Additionally, under section 45.2, permission is required to enlarge the existing second single detached dwelling, as section 13.2K permits a maximum of 1 single detached dwelling per lot, and as a result of the proposed severance, there would be 2 existing single detached dwellings remaining on the lot. Looking now to part 2, this proposed lot contains an accessory structure, and relief is required from section 3, which defines an accessory building as a separate and subordinate building or structure on the same lot as the main building, devoted exclusively to an accessory use. And as a result of the severance, the existing accessory building would temporarily remain as a standalone structure without a main use until a new dwelling is constructed. The application seeks to permit the enlargement of the second single detached dwelling on part 4, again labeled in pink. The proposal is for the dwelling to be renovated and expanded to 130 square meters in size. It is currently 65 square meters in size. The proposed configuration of the new lots will result in 2 of the existing single detached dwellings being located on the same lot. As a maximum of 1 dwelling unit, being 1 single detached dwelling, is permitted per lot, a variance is required to permit the enlargement of the non-conforming second dwelling. In accordance with section 45(2)AI, if a structure was used for a purpose prohibited by the bylaw as of March 28, 2006, which is the date of passage of the bylaw, the committee may permit its enlargement if its use has continued to present day. The dwelling was constructed in 1920, according to Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, and as such predates the zoning bylaw. As per bylaw 2020-161, bylaw to amend the Oak Ridges Moraine zoning bylaw number 2005-133 to rezone land within the city of Kawartha Lakes, an additional residential unit or ARU is only permitted within the primary dwelling. So a detached ARU is not permitted under the Oak Ridges Moraine zoning bylaw. Therefore, the application seeks permission to enlarge the existing single detached dwelling through section 45(2) of the Planning Act, instead of registering one of the dwellings as an ARU. Multiple single detached dwellings have coexisted on this property and have demonstrated their compatibility for a number of years, and no negative impacts are anticipated to result from the dwellings continuing to exist on the same property. Under the ARU policies, 2 dwelling units would be permitted within the same building, and the proposed density here is still 2 dwelling units, but the units are to continue to exist as separate single detached dwellings. The retained lot requires relief from the minimum lot frontage required in the RR1 zone. The proposed frontage is comparable to other existing lots in the area, and in fact at 26.03 meters, the proposed frontage is larger than several of the frontages of existing residential lots in the area. And I've just taken a screenshot here with some of the measurements of the frontages mapped out so you can see for context. Therefore, the proposed retained lot will be consistent with the existing lot fabric. The intent of the minimum lot frontage requirement is to ensure lots are large enough to accommodate development while ensuring there is adequate space for amenity uses, private services when they're required, and stormwater infiltration. The proposed retained lot complies with the required minimum lot area, and its size will accommodate development, amenity space, and infiltration. The minimum lot frontage also ensures that properties are wide enough to support a building envelope that could comply with the minimum side yard setbacks. The proposed lot is wide enough that future potential redevelopment could comply with required side yard setbacks. Additionally, the Building and Septic Division has confirmed that the proposed lot is adequately sized to support private on-site sewage disposal. The existing detached garage on Part 5 and the 2 existing single detached dwellings on Part 4 require relief from the minimum front yard setback. The buildings predate the zoning bylaw and no further encroachments are proposed. The intent of the minimum front yard setback is to ensure there's adequate spatial separation between buildings and the traveled portion of the road. There is room for a vehicle between the existing detached garage and the traveled portion of the road, so if a vehicle was stored in that garage, it could exit and the driver could check for oncoming traffic before entering the road allowance. But Part 5 does have another existing driveway that's separate from this one that can accommodate parking vehicle storage. Additionally, the area between the two single detached dwellings located on Part 4 and the road is significantly sloped, creating a physical and visual barrier or separation between the built form and the road. The existing single detached dwelling on Part 5 requires relief from the minimum side yard setback. The reduced setback is existing and no further encroachment is proposed. The purpose of an interior side yard is to manage massing and to provide sufficient space for lot drainage, access between front and rear yards, and building maintenance. The existing 1.8 meter side yard setback between the dwelling and the eastern lot line is adequate room for providing space for building maintenance and access to the rear yard, and there is also ample room on the west side of the dwelling for rear yard access. The interior side yard setback also serves as a privacy barrier between abutting properties. The subject dwelling and the dwelling on the neighboring property are separated by the neighbor's driveway, providing separation between the two dwellings to contribute to privacy. One of the existing dwellings on Part 4 requires relief from the minimum dwelling unit area. The dwelling is approximately 82 square meters in size and was constructed in the 1920s. This size of dwelling is more common for older housing stock, and the existing dwelling is not significantly smaller than other dwellings found in this area. Oh. Right. As a result of the severance, the existing accessory building on Part 2 would temporarily remain as a standalone structure without a main use until a new dwelling is constructed. The shed complies with all provisions of the bylaw, apart from the requirement that an accessory use be located on the same lot as a primary use. The corrugated steel shed will be used as a workshop and storage shed, as it has been since its construction in 1975. The granting of a variance will allow the accessory use to continue without a primary use until the decision of the Committee of Adjustment lapses. And after this time, a primary use will need to be established for the accessory structure to be compliant with the zoning bylaw. The following comments were received as a result of the consent circulation. The supervisor of Part 8 sewage system stated that the properties were reviewed for the ability to service them, and it was determined that the proposed lots will be able to support private on-site sewage disposal systems, which would be wholly contained within the established boundaries. As such, the Building and Septic Division has no concerns with the proposed consent applications as they relate to private on-site sewage disposal. Comments were received from the Engineering and Corporate Assets Division stating that stormwater management and overall lot grading for the lots needs to be addressed, and that the proponent's engineering consultant is to prepare the pre-construction road survey of Drum Road, and these requirements are reflected in Appendix E, the proposed conditions of provisional consent. Comments were received from the Ministry of Transportation stating that they have no concerns with the proposed residential lots, but have requested conditions be placed on the approval of the consent applications, which are reflected in Appendix E. Comments were received from Autonomy Region Conservation Authority stating that the application is consistent with the PPS Section 3.1 relating to natural hazards, and provided that the development and site alteration adhere to the mitigation measures and recommendations outlined in the natural heritage evaluation that was completed. Orca technical staff is of the opinion that the proposed development is consistent with the intent of the applicable ORMCP policies, as well as the PPS, and the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. Additionally, through the circulation of the consent applications, comments from members of the public were received with concerns being raised regarding water supply, drainage, increased traffic, potential damage to the road, and environmental impacts. In response, I can say the zoning bylaw outlines larger minimum lot sizes for properties that are to be serviced by private services, including private wells, and the proposed lots comply with this minimum lot size. The conditions of the provisional consent include a requirement to address stormwater management and lot grading and drainage through the submission of lot grading and drainage plans, as reflected in Condition 3. As per Condition 4, the owner shall provide written confirmation as a result of the final inspection from Public Works Roads Division that the existing and proposed entrances for the parcels to be severed comply with bylaw 2017-151. In 2021, a natural heritage evaluation was completed by Geoprocess Research Associates, which determined that the proposed severances do not have ecological impacts on the significant woodland, on significant wildlife habitat, or on species at risk, and that minor potential impacts from construction are easily mitigated with best management practices, and these mitigation measures are included in Condition 3 of the approval for consent. Comments were also received as a result of the minor variance being circulated. The supervisor of Part 8 sewage systems provided that servicing will be acceptable for the properties with the proposed lot sizes and frontages, and that the existing structures will not hinder the placement of new or the replacement of existing sewage systems. As such, the Building and Septic Division has no concerns with the proposed minor variance as it relates to private on-site sewage disposal. Comments were received this morning from the Canadian Pacific Railway stating that the safety and welfare of residents can be adversely impacted by rail operations, and that CP is not in favor of residential uses that are not compatible with rail operations. They also provided that these freight trains operate 24/7, and there are recommended guidelines that are developed through collaboration between the Railway Association of Canada and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. And the Canadian Pacific Railway has requested that a condition be inserted in all property and tenancy agreements and offers of purchase and sale for all dwelling units in the proposed buildings. And those comments were forwarded this morning, or they were printed out and provided this morning. To address these comments, the consent agreement referenced in Condition 3 of Appendix E will be amended to include language to reflect the comments and recommendations of the Canadian Pacific Railway. The agreement is to be registered against the severed lands and is to include a provision that notification of the restrictions in the agreement be included in all future offers of purchase and sale of the lots, or the offer shall be considered as null and void, and to be binding on all subsequent owners of the lands. Additionally, this morning, comments were received from the Ministry of Transportation stating that the comments that were previously received as a result of the consent circulation still apply. And for the minor variance circulation, no comments were received from the public. Based on the contents of the report, staff acknowledges the minor variance application D20-2023-006 meets the test set out in Section 45.1 and Section 45.2 of the Planning Act, and staff respectfully recommends approval of the application, subject to the conditions identified within the report. And staff acknowledges that consent applications D03-2021-015, 016, and 017 represent good planning and are in accordance with Section 53.1 of the Planning Act, and therefore staff respectfully recommends approval of the application subject to the conditions identified within the report. Thank you.
Lots of detail there, Ms. Evans. Thank you. Are there any questions of the planner? Ms. Richardson, go ahead.
Through you, I just want to confirm that all the concerns of the neighbors have been addressed, i.e. wells contamination, runoff, drainage, etc.
Ms. Evans?
I'm going to defer to the Manager of Planning for that question.
All right, Ms. Berry, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Thank you for the question. To the member, we are of the opinion that the evaluation of the both variance application and the consents that preceded the variance capture and demonstrate that the concerns can be mitigated that have been raised by the members of the public. There hasn't been any identification of contamination up until this point. There are no previous concerns that are known to the city from any kind of contamination, and we don't have reason to believe that there would be a future contamination from a particular source point. So a couple other pieces around wells. There is a process in place in the province of Ontario to address the proper installation, drilling of wells. Wells are to be drilled by professional well drillers. There is not a jurisdiction here for the city to grant approval to wells. This is information that is delivered from the well driller to the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, MECP, and they are tracked. Well records are tracked under that agency's jurisdiction. So there isn't an actual approval that is needed to drill a well. There are setback requirements, of course, and we feel that those can be accommodated on the properties. Just a further perhaps piece of interest to the committee, the size of the proposed parcels to be severed to accommodate new dwellings do exceed the minimum requirements. When we look at policies in the official plan that speak to things like hydrogeology and protecting areas of hydrologic significance, and those are policies that are emphasized in the Orem Conservation Plan that has coverage here at this lot. That would be a piece to investigate further if the lots were smaller than what was being proposed here and the density of development was greater than what is being proposed here. So on that basis, we do think that the concerns can be adequately mitigated. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Follow up? Mr. Strongway, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe this is the first time I've seen a comment from the rail line, CP Rail. I'm just wondering if there's any further clarification. They're quite definite in stating that they're not in favor of residential uses. So I'm just wondering, in light of the rail line right there, and their, I won't say objection, but not in favor of, whether the staff have any further comments on that.
Ms. Berry, do you wish to deal with that?
Sure, Mr. Chair, thank you. And to the member for your question. We agree. We don't read an objection in the CPR's comment. This is not unusual for them to sort of use notification in this way as an opportunity to share their position with the municipality and with the community, and reiterate the awareness that also the official plan speaks to about compatibility and the placement of potentially incompatible uses, one beside the next. Now, we do recognize that this is an area that is already built out for residential purposes, and that there is, we think, ample opportunity on the lots to site the homes actually in greater distance from the right-of-way, the CPR right-of-way, than the existing residential buildings that are already there. The piece about the notification, or the, so to speak, the warning clause, again, not necessarily an unusual request. It is a note of information, but also we respect the position of the CPR and suggest that it is certainly reasonable to include with the other warning clauses already contemplated in the consent agreement that we are recommending to the committee is a good idea. To include this sort of warning clause about noise or potential vibration impacts, so that every subsequent user and owner of the property is made aware of this before they purchase the property.
Thank you.
Anything further from committee? Let's go with Ms. Archer.
Through you, please, to Ms. Evans. Could you, until this severance was contemplated, were all 3 dwellings serviced with 1 well and 1 septic system?
Yeah, through the chair, that's not something that I have knowledge on, so I think I will need to defer to the property owner, who I believe is on the line here, for more history on whether the dwellings have been connected to services and what their status is now.
Can you just hold that then until follow up? No? Mr. Erickson?
The chair, I was just going to say, Enbridge makes a comment but doesn't ask for a condition. They're just asking the applicant to be aware that there are situations that the applicant must be aware of before they do anything. So Enbridge likely will comment on any building permit stages. And yet they don't stipulate a condition.
Is there a question there?
I just wanted to note that one made a condition, the other did.
Anything further from committee? Oh, Mr. Richardson, I saw your hand.
Through you, on Appendix C, and it's actually the diagram up there, it appears that Part 2 does not front onto a municipal road. Am I correct in that presumption? And if that's the case, where will they get their entrance permit to?
Through the chair, it does front on a municipal road, understanding that this sketch doesn't quite show that, as it looks like there's a bit of a gap, but I'll show the lot plan here instead, which does show how, though it is kind of a diagonal, it does front on Drum Road there. It's a different part on the reference plan, being Part 2.
On Appendix C, it just reads transfer by order in council, March the 26th, 1975. So what was that all about then?
Through the chair, we'll take a look at it more closely and then take a minute and get back to the member.
Anything further from committee? I just have one, if I may. On the MTO information, I realize that at the bottom there, it speaks to what the severance, and that'll be dealt with through the severance process. But if we back up a paragraph there, they're indicating there's all kinds of approvals and permits are going to be required regarding this. Do we not feel it requires a condition for that, or is that something that we'll let evolve through the building process? Ms. Berry?
Sure, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. The conditions that have been recommended, required by the Ministry of Transportation are ones that are neatly tucked into the conditions of consent that are not tied necessarily to the timeframes involved in the minor variance. The minor variance very specific to the issuance of building permits, for example, conversion of the home being one, whereas the timeframe associated with the conditions of approval for the consent can be lengthier than what the owner is interested in for the building permit process. So we would suggest that it is appropriate to include the MTO's interests under the conditions of approval for the consent as opposed to the variance.
Thank you. No, that's all right. Anything further from Ed?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. My understanding of the MTO conditions and everything were only applicable if the proponent decided to do the work himself. If the MTO did it at their cost, what they wanted, then there were no conditions. So it'd be kind of foolish for them not to take the MTO up in the offer, but that was the understanding I had anyway.
Was there a question there, or just, no? All right. Is there anything further from committee? All right, being none. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application?
I'm willing to answer the question about the wells.
What is your name, sir?
My name is Andrew Louse.
All right, go ahead.
It is my understanding that all three dwellings were serviced by one well, at least from what the appearances that I saw when we took ownership. And I'm unsure as to whether they were serviced by one septic or two, as we were never able to locate the second septic. I hope that answers your question.
It does, thank you. Anything further you wish to say?
No, I don't think there's anything I need to speak to this application any further. I think it speaks to itself.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the applicant? All right, being none. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Opposition to the application? All right, being none. Committee, where are we? Not everybody at once, okay.
As printed.
All right, do I have a seconder? Mr. Strangway? Any further comments or questions with respect to the motion on the floor? Being none, all those in favor? Ms. Scott? All right, thank you. That carried. All right, thank you. Dealing D20-2023-001, and this is 94 Jasper Drive, Geographic Township of Fenelon. And again, Ms. Evans. Go ahead, Ms. Evans.
Thank you. The subject property, being 94 Jasper Drive, is designated waterfront under the City of Kawartha Lakes official plan and is zoned Rural Residential Type 3 or RR3 zone under the Township of Fenelon zoning bylaw 12-95. The subject property is located in a residential neighborhood located on the western shore of Balsam Lake. The area consists of a mixture of 1- and 2-story dwellings of varying ages. The subject property is rectangular in shape, has frontage on the water, and contains a dwelling, boathouse, and shed. The purpose of this application is to facilitate the construction of an attached sunroom in the rear yard. Section 13.2.13E of the bylaw requires a water setback of 15 meters. The proposed setback for the sunroom is 13.14 meters. And that setback is illustrated in red on the sketch there. Looking to some construction drawings now, the the dwelling is here, and this perspective is looking at the dwelling from the water side of the property, with the sunroom, proposed sunroom being here, and this side being here, just on the left. The photo on the left shows the rear yard, and the sunroom will be located here. I'll show it on both sides. So here, moving to this way, here. And the photo on the right again shows the rear yard, just from the opposite side of the yard, with the proposed location of the sunroom being right in front of frame here. So here. The proposed sunroom will provide sheltered seasonal amenity space while ensuring there is still adequate outdoor amenity space in the rear yard. The property is designated waterfront, and low-density residential uses are permitted within this designation, with performance and siting criteria being implemented through the zoning bylaw. The intent of the official plan is that development maintains a minimum setback of 15 meters from the shoreline in order to avoid natural hazards and provide environmental buffers. In this instance, the encroachment into the rear yard is minimal, and as such, the existing shoreline conditions are not anticipated to change. The subject property is zoned Rural Residential Type 3, and the proposal complies with all zone provisions with the exception of the required water setback. The intent of the minimum water setback is to provide sufficient space for the establishment of vegetation and for the infiltration of stormwater runoff. In this instance, the encroachment into the required water setback is minimal, and as such, the existing shoreline conditions are not anticipated to change. There are no anticipated impacts on environmental features, neighboring properties, or the function of the right-of-way. Comments were received from Kawartha Region Conservation Authority, stating that they have no concern with the proposal and that a permit will be required from their office. Comments were received from the supervisor of Part 8 sewage system, stating that the sewage system is located on the road side of the dwelling, and the sunroom will not encroach within the required clearance distances to the sewage system, nor will it cause an increase in the total daily sewage flow for the dwelling. and as such, the Building and Septic Division has no concerns with the proposed minor variance request as it relates to private on-site sewage disposal. Based on the contents of the report, staff acknowledges the application meets all 4 tests of a minor variance and respectfully recommends approval of the application subject to the conditions identified within the report. Thank you.
A little shorter, that one. Are there any questions of the planner? Mr. Strang?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a really quick one. This is a very minor application. I'm wondering why Kawartha Conservation is asking for a permit.
Through the chair, I believe it will be within their regulated area, so they would ask for a permit for this development.
I guess that's where I'm having, you know, as I say, it's a sunroom with a, what is it, a 1 meter less into the, and I'm just wondering why, you know, they're requiring, I realize it's in the regulated area, but, okay, thank you.
Actually, that's a good question, though. What is the do you have any idea what the regulation is that they're impeding upon that needs to be addressed?
I will pull up their direct comments so I can quote them myself.
Mr. Chair, while the planner is taking a look for the comments, just to be able to quote the regulation out of the Conservation Authorities Act, I have actually thought of this as well on occasion, and I am afraid I don't know enough about the application process and the review, essentially, that goes into the process at the KRCA, or frankly any CA, when a proponent applies for a permit within a regulated area. And if there are various degrees of, or I'm not going to say scrutiny, of course the scrutiny is the same and the review is the same, but if there is a minor type of permit versus a major type of permit, if that evaluation takes place when the KRCA staff, in this case KRCA, when their staff is reviewing an application, that's a conversation that I will have with the KRCA the next time we speak, just to understand that process a little better.
Thank you. And I thought Mr. Strangway's question was excellent because we know that the Kawartha Conservation regulates an enormous area with respect to the city of Kawartha Lakes. But because of that, it doesn't necessarily mean that every time someone puts up something that they need a permit from the authority. So I agree with you. I'm just curious as to what the specifics are with respect to their concern requiring a permit.
Yes, through the chair. The comments state, any development within Kawartha Conservation's regulated area will require a permit pursuant to Ontario Regulation 18206, which involves development, interference with wetlands, and alterations to shorelines and watercourses. And it is stated that permissions are required from Kawartha Region Conservation Authority prior to any of the following work taking place, including development, if that development would impact the control of flooding, erosion, dynamic beaches, pollution, or the conservation of land.
Yes, Mr. Strangway, go ahead.
First of all, I thank the staff for that information. And where I'm at now is it begs even more of a question. I don't see this in any way affecting that. And you know, once again, I'm questioning, you know, it almost seems automatic we need a permit. And if Ms. Berry could get back to us with further information, clarification in the future, that'd be greatly appreciated. Thanks.
And perhaps we could handle it this way as well. I think the fact that we haven't put it on here as a condition, it doesn't specifically impact us, but I would assume perhaps through the building process part that there may be conversations between Ms. Murchison and the Conservation Authority. Ms. Berry?
Precisely, Mr. Chair. That's what we understand, is that it's not needed as a separate condition because it is built into the building permit application process, meaning a building permit wouldn't be able to be issued until, if required, KRCA or CA with jurisdiction has issued a permit if required. So this is sort of a notification, fair warning to the proponent and to all of us, including staff, that there may be this requirement coming, and it is built into the system of the building permit process.
But I don't think we've ever seen a broad statement like that from them before where they haven't been specific with respect to what they're looking for. Councillor Yoke.
Yeah, thank you, and I'm so thankful somebody brought this up, because I just wanted to speak to it, because it's not the only place in this agenda where Kawartha Conservation is requesting something, and another one down Indian Point about some sort of rock formation or something, but in that broad statement where a permit is going to be required, anybody with a head on their shoulders would know that this doesn't meet any of those criteria, my opinion, I guess. And if you wanted to, any proof why Bill 23 has breath in it, then this is a situation that trying to regulate stuff that shouldn't be regulated. And just a comment, thank you.
Yeah, I agree with the committee members' comments, and I think, and Ms. Berry, you indicated you may very well be conversing with them, so I wonder in the future that if they could be, rather than these broad statements, if they could be more specific with respect to what they're looking for when they mention a permit's required. We can leave that with you then. Thank you. Anything further from, Erickson, go ahead.
For this application, it follows like the previous one with Enbridge. Both organizations just want to make the applicants aware that there is something that they're going to have to abide by. They're not putting them in as conditions, but they're just letting them know under their own inspections of the future applications that these will in fact be looked at, and they may need their individual permits, or in the terms of gas lines, the work I did in Caesarea for Enbridge, they will step in and say it has to be done this way at this location, but they won't encumber the process in general.
The problem with it not being red flagged, and we've been through this before with the chief building official, is that these things get missed. So Enbridge can say what they want, MTO can say what they want, CP Rail can say what they want, but if it's just part of a report, it may very well get missed. And in the past, we have red flagged these. It would appear now that it isn't such a prominent issue that we need to do that, but at the end, I hear what you're saying, but at the end of the day, some of these things do get missed because they're part of a report rather than being conditions with the application. So it's, we'll leave it there. Hopefully, Ms. Berry can clarify some issues there with the Conservation Authority. So anyway, thanks everyone for their comments. Anything further from committee? All right. The applicant online, does the applicant wish to speak to the application?
Hello, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Matt Price from Pricon Custom Building and Renovations. I am acting as agent for the owner, who is also on this call if any questions need to be answered by them. But I think your staff has done a good job explaining what relief we're looking for the purposes of building the 400 square foot sunroom. And for the record, I'd like to concur with committee members and yourself about the your efforts to streamlining the approval process. So thank you for those comments, and I look forward to continuing that effort. I'm here to answer any questions that committee has, if there are any.
All right, we'll see, and thank you, sir, for your time and your comments. Are there any questions of the deputy? Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of the application? No, I don't think so under that. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Opposition to the application? No, we got the public. Are you referring to? Yeah, no. All right. That being said, committee, where are we? Ms. Archer. All right, as printed. Do I have a seconder? Mr. Strangway? Further comments or questions with respect? Oh, did I see a hand there? Ms. Scar, did you wish to speak to it?
Just offering to be a seconder.
Oh, good. Appreciate that, because sometimes I miss the people up there in the air, so thank you for that. All right, all those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. All right. Good discussion on another one, folks. Much appreciated. All right. Moving right along, we're now dealing with file number D20-2023-002, and this is 161 Lindsay Street South, former town of Lindsay. Ms. Peck, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As mentioned, the subject property is municipally addressed as 161 Lindsay Street South, located in the town of Lindsay. The subject property is zoned residential multiple 2 under the town of Lindsay zoning bylaw and is designated medium density residential in the town of Lindsay official plan. The applicant is seeking relief under section 45(2) of the Planning Act to permit an enlargement of a non-conforming use and to permit a land use that is similar to or more compatible than the use of the land that existed before the date the bylaw was passed. The applicant is proposing a redevelopment to facilitate the construction of a new single detached dwelling and 2 additional residential units, ARUs, 1 attached to the primary dwelling and 1 detached. To facilitate the proposal, the applicant is also seeking relief from the maximum lot coverage percentage occupied by open parking spaces, driveways, and vehicle movement areas. The subject property is located northwest of the intersection of Lindsay Street South and Mary Street. The property abuts medium-density residential uses to the north and low-density residential uses to the south. Across the street on the east side of Lindsay Street is a mix of residential and commercial uses. Nearby commercial uses include Stuart Morrison Insurance, a Dairy Queen restaurant, and a Ford car dealership. The image 1 on the top shows some of the nearby medium-density uses, including a converted dwelling at 157 Lindsay Street South and an apartment building at 155 Lindsay Street South. Oh, sorry, that the medium-density uses are shown on the bottom, and the commercial uses, some of the commercial uses are shown on the top. The property's existing use is residential and currently contains a single detached dwelling circa 1890, as well as a detached garage, which was built around 1902. The property's existing use predates the first Lindsay zoning bylaw, which was established on October 2nd, 1978. A single detached dwelling is not permitted on the property as of right under the RM2 zone. Therefore, the applicant is seeking relief under section 45(2) of the Planning Act to permit the continuation of this use and the enlargement of an existing non-conforming building. The property is designated medium-density residential under the Town of Lindsay official plan, and citing criteria is implemented through the zoning bylaw. Medium-density residential uses include triplex and fourplex dwellings, row or block townhouse dwellings, converted dwellings, walk-up apartments, and similar medium-profile residential buildings that do not exceed 4 stories in height. Therefore, the current use of the land as a single detached dwelling proposes a different building typology than envisioned in this area under the bylaw. The proposed redevelopment maintains both the zoning bylaw and official plan's general intent, as the proposed 3-dwelling unit, that being the single detached house and 2 ARUs, is equal to or greater than the density achieved in other permitted uses under the R2 zone. The proposed redevelopment maintains the general purpose of the official plan and zoning bylaw. This is due to, first, the redevelopment's density and height are characteristic with adjacent uses. Second, the subject property has direct access to an arterial road and is already serviced by city water and sewage infrastructure. Third, the redevelopment will provide sufficient parking on site to accommodate the proposed use. And lastly, the proposal responds to recent official plan and zoning bylaw amendments that establish new land use policies for additional residential units. An ARU is permitted in all zones that permit a single detached dwelling, semi-detached dwelling, or a townhouse dwelling. As I mentioned, the applicant is proposing the enlargement of a non-conforming use, a single detached dwelling, to avoid the need for a stacked building typology. The proposed building typology, being a single detached dwelling and 2 ARUs, is aimed at increasing tenant enjoyment by reducing the likelihood of conflicts and complaints. For instance, conflicts that may be brought on by the transfer of noise between units when they are stacked on top of each other. The lot's limited frontage removed the owner's preferred building typology, which was a townhouse dwelling. The proposal also meets nearly all of the zone requirements under the R3 zone, which is a zone that permits single detached dwellings, contemplated at a lot density that remains compatible with the provisions and permitted uses under the RM2 zone category. In other words, the proposed building type as a single detached dwelling also generally meets the minimum requirements under a zoning category that permits its use. Under the RM2 zone, a minimum of 3 dwelling units are permitted on the subject property as of right. The proposal is in keeping with the bylaw's contemplated density, which makes it more compatible than the uses permitted under the bylaw when it was first passed. The applicant is also seeking relief from section 5.11JX of the bylaw, which permits a maximum lot coverage of 30% dedicated to open parking spaces, driveways, and vehicle movement areas. A lot coverage of 36% is dedicated to these areas as proposed. The applicant is proposing a total of 5 parking spaces, 1 indoor parking space in the attached garage here, and then as well as 4 outdoor parking spaces, which are shaded in that light gray here and here. It's important to note that the bylaw only requires 4 parking spaces, and if the applicant opted to remove the excess parking space, then the proposed variance would be 2.5% rather than 6%. The owner values the extra parking space to provide additional space for tenants and their guests to park, to reduce the need for off-site parking or on-street parking. The image above shows an example of the property viewed from its rear, which includes an extension of the existing driveway towards the lot's rear, as well as the proposed parallel parking spaces. So I'm standing at the property's rear, and this is one of the proposed ARUs, roughly sketched, and the primary dwelling, as well as the attached ARU, with the existing driveway extending to the property's rear, with flanking parallel parking spots. The proposed driveway will remain in the same general location as it exists today, and as seen on the image on the right, this image shows the existing property's interface with the neighboring lot to the south. The driveway will extend in depth towards the lot's rear, limiting the amount of change from the appearance of the dwelling as viewed from the street. Furthermore, a fence is proposed around 3 of the lot's 4 sides to screen views of vehicles from neighboring lots. The proposed single detached dwelling and ARUs are 1 story in height, and therefore the building will not overshadow adjacent uses, and their massing will complement the neighboring house to the south, shown on the image to the left. No comments or objections of concern were received by circulated agencies. We did receive a written comment from a Mr. Michael Lamantang. A printed copy of these comments have been provided to the committee, and a digital version of these comments have been forwarded to the owner, Mr. Rod Brown. These comments generally pertain to property standards and other city bylaws, such as the city's noise bylaw. Because the nature of these concerns are not regulated by the zoning bylaw, they are under the jurisdiction of the city's municipal law enforcement division and should be handled as such if concerns do arise. The commenter, the member of the public also requested that the proposed fence be constructed first. However, the sequencing of building construction is not regulated by the city's zoning bylaw, and therefore it is not contemplated as a condition of variance. Based on the contents of the report, staff acknowledges the application meets the intent of section 45(2) of the Planning Act, and staff respectfully recommends approval of the application subject to the conditions identified in the report.
Thank you, Ms. Peck. Are there any questions of the planner? Mr. Erickson?
Through the chair, the parking spaces I can understand how they get in, but how do they get out? The turning radius is insufficient. And could I just ask another one? For the driveway to...
Well, let's go one at a time.
Okay.
All right. Ms. Peck, do you wish to respond to that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So this would function similar to as you would park on a street, when you see parallel parking spaces on a street. So you would approach and you would parallel park, and then you would get out the same way. The dimensions of the parking spaces, being parallel parking spaces, are regulated by the zoning bylaw, and the parking spaces proposed meet those minimum size requirements.
Follow up, Mr. Erickson?
Yes. Okay, they go in, they come off, how do they turn around to come back to the street? There's no turning radius. The aisle, the driveway is, you're showing 4 meters. That's insufficient. That's not a good turning radius. You'd need awful small cars, each of them.
I'll give the planners a minute here. All right.
Thank you, through the chair. So similar to how a driveway would function, I mean, they're in for a single detached dwelling, they could back out of the parking space, as well as there's no turning radius required under the zoning bylaw. So the driver would or could back out this way, in this case, or back into the parking space. Also, in addition to that, only 4 parking spaces are required under the zoning bylaw. So if this were to be an issue, there is room for the owner to convert one of these parking spaces for more room to maneuver cars while still being compliant with the zone provisions.
One more, please.
Then we've beaten it up pretty good. All right, go ahead.
Through the chair, the parking space closest to the park, is there any stipulated setback that a parking space can be to the park in a residential zone? I noticed the dealership down the street has parking right along the fence.
Ms. Peck?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there is no setback requirements for driveway or paved areas in a residential zone. And there is requirements of a landscape buffer, for example. It's 0.6 meters, you can see it right here. But this parking space does comply with that buffer.
Mr. Erickson, you're good? Anything further from committee members? Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application? All right, being none. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Opposition to the application? Being none. Committee. Councillor.
As Brent.
All right, Councillor Yeo is the mover. Do I have a seconder? Mr. Erickson? Any further comments or questions with respect to the motion on the floor? All those in favor? All right, and that carries. Moving right along, we're now dealing with D20-2023-003. This is 71 Falls Bay Road, Geographic Township of Verlin. Ms. Evans, go ahead.
Thank you. The subject property, being 71 Falls Bay Road, is designated waterfront under the City of Kawartha Lakes official plan and is zoned residential type 1 or R1 zone under the Township of Verlin zoning bylaw 6-87. The subject property is located in a residential neighborhood on the western shore of Pigeon Lake. The neighborhood is comprised primarily of 1- and 2-story dwellings with varying setbacks from the road. The subject property currently contains a detached garage, which was constructed in 1955 according to Municipal Property Assessment Corporation. The purpose of the application is to facilitate the renovation and conversion of the existing garage to a single detached dwelling with a second-story deck. The setbacks requiring relief are lined in red on the sketch. Section 8.2G of the bylaw requires a minimum rear yard setback of 7.5 meters. The existing setback is 3.01 meters. In addition to Section 8.2D, the required minimum front yard setback of 7.5 meters, Section 5.18.3 of the bylaw requires an additional 10-meter setback from the center of the road allowance. The existing setback is 2.81 meters from the front lot line and 9.03 meters from the center of the road allowance. Section 8.2N of the bylaw requires a minimum water setback of 15 meters. The proposed setback is 13.57 meters. The existing footprint of the garage is to be maintained, with the existing garage door to be removed and with a proposed second-story deck extending towards the water.
Before you go on any further, I just ask the committee members and planners and everyone else speaking, if you just stay a little closer to your mics, because I'm advised that some folks are having a hard time hearing what's going on. So if you would, please, thank you. Ms. Evans, I apologize for that.
The applicant has provided these drawings to show what the dwelling is to look like. The drawing on the left is a side view and shows what the dwelling would look like from Falls Bay Road. The drawing on the right shows the view of the dwelling from the water side of the property. The photo on the left here shows what the garage looks like today, viewed from the water side of the property. The photo on the right was taken from the road and shows the garage from the side. The photo on the left shows the existing setback from the rear lot line, which is the lot line opposite Falls Bay Road. The photo on the right was taken looking south, showing the distance between the existing building and the road. Both setbacks are to be maintained, and no further encroachment towards the rear or front lot lines are proposed. This photo shows the proposed addition of the second-story deck, which will encroach into the water yard. And I've just added an overlay showing, not to scale, but it does give a general idea of what that proposed second-story deck would look like with the actual garage in the photo. Over time, it can be expected that owners may redevelop their properties to achieve their highest and best use. As the property only contains an accessory structure and cannot accommodate a new independent residential building in addition to the existing garage due to the size of the property, the proposal is to renovate the garage and convert it to a single detached dwelling, increasing the overall function of the property. The proposal seeks to maintain the existing non-complying front and rear yard setbacks as part of the redevelopment and add a second-story deck, which also requires relief from the zoning bylaw, as the proposed posts are to be located within the water setback. The property is designated waterfront, and low-density residential uses are permitted within this designation, with performance and siting criteria being implemented through the zoning bylaw. The intent of the official plan is that development maintains a minimum setback of 15 meters from the shoreline in order to avoid natural hazards and provide environmental buffers. In this instance, only the posts supporting the proposed second-story deck will be at ground level, minimizing built form within the water setback. The subject property is zoned residential type 1 zone, and a single detached dwelling is a permitted use. The proposal complies with all zone provisions with the exception of the minimum front yard setback, the minimum rear yard setback, and the minimum water setback. One of the purposes of the minimum rear yard setback is to provide adequate amenity space. For this property, the rear lot line functions more as an interior side lot line, with the amenity space for the property being provided in the interior side yard between the shoreline and the building. Though there is limited amenity space in what the bylaw defines as the rear yard, the open space between the water and the building can accommodate outdoor recreation. The intent of the minimum front yard setback is to ensure adequate spatial separation between built form and the traveled portion of the street, and to maintain features such as sightlines. In addition to the front yard setback required by the R1 zone, the general provisions section of the bylaw contains provisions establishing minimum setbacks for the center of a road allowance. The required setback varies depending on the classification of road, with the higher the classification, being the more major the road, the greater the required setback. The street centerline setback appears to have been written on the premise that should a road allowance be of a non-standard width for its classification, built form will be adequately set back from it in the event the municipality decided to take a road widening. It is unlikely the municipality would pursue road widenings within the community, given that this would result in the further reduction of already undersized lot areas, and due to the fact that there are already buildings and structures within the street centerline setback. There are no anticipated impacts on environmental features or neighboring properties. Comments were received from the supervisor of Part 8 sewage systems stating that a sewage system permit to install has been issued for this property, which will provide for sewage disposal servicing through a Class 5 holding tank. The conversion and renovation can be accommodated by the proposed system, and therefore the Building and Septic Division has no concerns with the minor variance proposal as it relates to private sewage disposal. After the writing of the report, comments were received from the manager of Roads Operations East, stating that there is an operational concern with the existing reduced setback when it's combined with the location of the existing entrance, as due to the reduced setback, vehicles will potentially overhang into the right-of-way when parked, which would impact winter maintenance and potentially snow in vehicles during snow events. To address this, an amendment to the report is required, adding a third condition, which is to read that prior to issuance of a building permit, the owner will undergo an entrance review and/or entrance permit application to ensure the entrance meets the current bylaw 2017-151 to the satisfaction of the Public Works Roads Division. Comments were received from a member of the public with concern regarding the history of building permits on the property being too small to accommodate an appropriately sized sewage system, as well as the proposed location of the sewage system, parking, and potential parking on the road. Comments were also received from another member of the public via phone this morning, with concerns regarding the drilling of a well, development potentially occurring on their own property, and the history of building permits. In response, the proposed sewage system has been reviewed and its size and location on the property have been approved. I did send the comments received by the member of the public to the supervisor of Part 8 sewage system so she could take a look at them. And she did state that there are no minimum clearance distances for a Class 5 holding tank to a lake, river, creek, stream, or other open body of water. As such, the location of the proposed Class 5 holding tank is Ontario Building Code compliant for clearance distances. Additionally, the Class 5 holding tank is watertight, and it is a self-contained unit that will be anchored during installation. So this protects the tank against incoming water or any potential heaving during flood events. In relation to parking, there are 2 parking spaces on the property, and a condition has been added to this report to ensure the entrance will be reviewed by Public Works Roads Division. An accessory building, such as a garage, is not permitted on a property without a primary use. The proposed conversion of the garage to a dwelling will bring the use into conformity with the zoning bylaw. Based on the contents of the report, staff acknowledges the application meets all 4 tests of a variance and respectfully recommends approval of the application subject to the conditions identified within the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Questions of the planner? Mr. Richardson?
Through you, from looking at the schedule that's up there right now, it appears there's already a 1.5-story building. Is that the garage that they're proposing to convert into a home?
Through the chair, the structure on the property is currently 1.5 to 2 stories, but it is being used as a garage, and the proposal is to convert it to a single detached dwelling use.
As a follow-up, how are they able to build a garage when it's accessory to nothing?
Ms. Evans?
Through the chair, the garage was constructed in 1955, so it does predate this zoning bylaw. So in terms of what it was approved for at the time, that would be based on something other than our current policies today.
All right. Mr. Wright?
You answered the question about the tank. The only, for my own education, a Class 5 tank does not have a septic bed along with it, and that's why it's okay to locate it here.
Ms. Evans?
Through the chair, no, it does not have a septic bed.
Okay.
Through you, please, to Ms. Evans. I'm just having a problem, the concerns with respect to parking, with the snow removal and everything. Is that whole stretch along the top, that's their laneway? Like, can they park in that laneway?
Through the chair, are you referring to here?
Right at the very edge, it says laneway, I think. Is that their laneway?
Oh, driveway. Let me show a picture that I think will better. So here we are, the property line being right past the garage here. We are in the driveway. We could have backed up further, of course, but we did not. So the parking is contained here in front of this garage door.
But is that not the garage door that's going to be removed? So it looked like they can park all along their laneway, which appears to be north of the dwelling, garage?
Time for consultation.
Mr. Chair, we're just actually asking for clarification on where the phrase "the laneway" is coming from, if from the member.
On the photo, on Schedule Appendix C, it says driveway right across the very top. So I'm thinking, if that's a driveway, they've taken out, I think I heard that the garage doors are being removed. It's not going to be a home anymore, so they will park up there on the driveway.
Thank you for that.
Through the chair, thank you for that time. I believe the sketch is referring to the neighbor's driveway for that label. So the driveway for this dwelling is right in front of the garage doors that, yes, are to be removed.
Thank you very much. That clarifies it.
All right. Anything further from committee? All right, being done. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application? Doesn't wish to speak? Well, you can always jump in then. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in?
Sorry, this is Alex. I was just trying to figure out how to unmute. I apologize. Yeah, I don't have further comments. Just like to comment that the project has been approved by Kawartha Conservation on the permit number 2022-266. That's it. Thank you.
All right, we'll leave it at that then. All right. Thank you, sir, for those comments. Are there any questions of the applicant? All right, being none. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application, in support of the application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to the application, opposition to the application? Ma'am, I believe you had some words you want to offer on this one. Please come up to the podium if you would. There's a button there that says speak. Would you push that for us? Oh, you were close. I saw it. There you are. Okay, go ahead.
Okay,
What is your name, first of all?
I'm sorry.
Your name, please.
Rose Benici, that's my maiden name when the house was bought. And my married name is Pope.
Right, thank you for that.
P-O-P-E.
Yep.
I live at 531 Birchmont Road in Scarborough, but I own the cottage. I have 3/4 of an acre of land. Now, I know the history of the Fultons and the Lippingtons, and I don't understand why you want to change, especially taking anything from my property to give him the extra property from the land. That's my property, guys.
Just a minute now. To that.
Because there's a walkway, but first of all, they removed my fence that marked where the walkway was, public walkway, and I did not find my peg, my steel peg that also marked my property. They were both gone. So somebody had to have removed those, okay? That means he would have to turn around, landscape my property according to my this is my oopsie, sorry, which I want you guys to have a good look at it so you can really see where the walkways are. So it was a garage. He built 2 years ago above that garage and made it a house. I would like to see where the permit is that he applied for to build that. That is one issue. And second of all, I want to know who took out my pegs, who took out my fence. Because there is a stick with orange on it, because he is also a contractor, people. So he can do anything he pretty well wants that nobody here knows what he does. Anyway, there was a stake, but that does not mean that stake is where my peg and my fence were. So I have a lot of issues about, did he take some of my property? Now, if you guys want to give him more property for where the garage is, that's that piece that you're showing right now, okay? First of all, I want to see the permit that he asked for, because definitely he needed a permit. And second of all, I want to know why my fence was removed from him. And if you take a look, this is the garage. Here was the public walkway. And behind the garage was also a public walkway that went to the lake. So anybody that had a boat, because Mr. Fulton sold 3 pieces of property, and those 3 pieces of property all were entitled to be able to launch their boat in the public walkway in front of my place, which I was aware of when we bought the house. I've never stopped anybody before, but if you guys say that his is a public or private, how are these people supposed to get their boats into the water? Because between my garage and, or his garage and my property from the side, and his garage and the public walkway, how are they supposed to get a boat in there? They can't. The only way they can go is right down to the lake where that piece of property is, and then here is the lake. That's the only way they can get a boat in there. So how is that not a public part of the walkway? I don't understand that. Somebody please explain that one to me also. I oppose to what you guys want to do, because you're not taking any of my property. If you want to take any property, you take it from the public walkway that Bill Fulton gave to the city. Then the city gave it back to him. Then the city, he gave it back to the city as he got older. So people explain to me why that is happening.
All right, I've heard what you've had to say. Let's see what the, if the planner can help you out at all with some of these things. So I guess, Ms. Evans, we're dealing with the building permit, so I'd ask you to speak to that. We're dealing with the fence that was supposedly removed. Perhaps you can speak to that. And the boat access, and I think...
Excuse me, how did he get a permit to put a well there?
Well, let us speak to it, okay?
Oh, I'm sorry, thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Evans.
Thank you. Through the chair. I'll try and go in order here. First, to say that this is not a proposal for a lot line adjustment. There's no severance involved, so no land is being taken from other property owners. The boundaries of 71 Falls Bay Road are to remain as they are today. Regarding the removal of a fence or a stake, that's not something that I'm able to speak to. For the public walkway, let me show the location map here to give some context as to the location. So I believe the public walkway that's being referred to is this rectangular piece here. So the subject property being here, so that public access ends at 71 Falls Bay. In terms of boat access, speaking on an assumption only, perhaps because I did see that that access point, that access property does extend to this road here. So perhaps the route would be to take the boats this way instead of cutting through privately owned property, being 71 Falls Bay Road.
But there is no public walkway there.
Oh, yeah, ma'am, don't interrupt. I'll get back to you, okay? Go ahead.
Thank you.
And as far as the history of building permits go, I have discussed this with the chief building official, and I'd like to defer to her for further comment on history of permits on the property.
All right. Do we have, yes, Ms. Murchison, you've heard the conversations going on. Would you care to respond?
Sure. Through the chair, in searching our database, we have no record of any building permit being issued since the inception of the city for this property. So any work that was done without our knowledge, and we would have to investigate that further outside of this meeting.
All right. All right, ma'am, you've heard the comments. There was a proper permit issued for the construction that we're looking for. The fence being removed, if it was removed, is not within our jurisdiction to make a comment one way or the other. And as far as the boat access is concerned, I think Ms. Evans explained that as well as she could with respect to how they'll access egress boats, so.
Okay, because surely, Bill Fulton's daughter owned that piece of property that you're talking about, and there was no public walkway there. There's two public walkways. You got the roadway down to the lake where the big house is built, and then you've got the public walkway across from in front of my property, down to the side of Shirley's along the lake. There is no back public walkway from Shirley's property.
Yeah, we're not, excuse me, ma'am, we're not here to discuss that sort of access. I've asked the planner to speak to it, but we really don't need to because it's not part of what we're dealing with here. So I think we've answered your questions with respect to the permit process, the fence, and the access as best we can. So do you have anything other than that?
Well, all I ask you is make sure that none of my property is touched.
All right, thank you for that. And
I disapprove with what you are doing with, and next time I would also like you to send me a copy of the building permit that he applied for 2 years ago when he built that house on that garage. I want to see it.
yeah, thank you for taking the time, and we appreciate you making your presentation. So thank you for that. Ms. Berry, could I ask that you turn that mic off, please?
I've been there since 1980.
I should have asked, are there any questions of the committee with respect to the deputy? Hang on, just a minute, ma'am, we're not finished yet, so just have your seat there if you would, please. Ms.
I just wondered if I could see a copy of that survey she seems to have. Is that illegal?
Do we have?
Allowed?
Oh, a copy of the one she's got? All right. The survey that you have, you presented that to us. Do you wish to leave it with us, or do you wish to retain it? Because there are committee members that would like to see it. Perhaps, Ms. Archer, maybe to the podium and let her look at that.
Chair to staff, is it possible to get somebody on staff to see if there are any deeded rights of way or public accesses that she is referring to?
Mr. Chair, through you, from the mapping that we have access to, that we use in evaluating not just the proposal, but questions like this when they come up, indicates that the land adjacent to the residential lot is municipally owned. Whether there is an established walkway per se, a boardwalk or a path or something like this, covered in snow at the moment and not indicated at the detail we would need to see on the aerial satellite imagery, but it is municipal land. That could very well be what the resident is referring to.
Ms. Archer, I'm going to ask you to speak to whatever it is you're discussing there to the committee when you come back, please. Normally, if paperwork is presented at a committee, we take it, but I don't think she's probably willing to give that up. Attempting to clarify, go ahead.
Attempting to clarify where her property is in relation to that property. I think she's further up. I don't even think she's right beside the property. I think she's further south. But anyway, she doesn't have a copy of her deed, so it's part of lot concession, so it's hard to tell. So I suggested she see her lawyer, Mr. Webster, when she bought the property, and she can deal with that with him.
All right. Anything from either one of you further with respect to the application? Are there any further questions of the committee? Ms. Richardson.
As the chief building official has advised that there was no building permit taken out for the reconstruction of the garage 2 years ago or more, should we be deferring this or adding a condition that past due building permit fees are collected or something to that effect?
Good question. Ms. Evans, I was of the opinion you had covered that, but you may not have. So do you want to respond to Ms. Richardson's comment?
Mr. Chair, sorry, I'm just not...
No, we want an informed response, not just a response, so go ahead.
Which the planner would certainly be able to provide, and was probably just confirming. But in any event, I understand the owner's on the line, and I would ask Mr. Chair if you seek some clarity, perhaps around any past building activity, that we allow him an opportunity to speak to that. I myself can't immediately tell you how long the property has been in his ownership, or if this is a structure that existed on the property prior to his ownership. The application would speak to that. I just don't have that at my fingertips, although we can access that quite easily. In the meantime, if we wanted to perhaps consider having the owner speak to that matter.
Is the applicant, Mr. Maddox, still on the line?
Yes, I am.
Mr. Maddox, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
I guess he can.
I can. Can you hear me?
All right. My question is this. There's been some questions raised with respect to the building permit history there. Can you give us an indication of when you applied for your permit for the garage initially?
Okay. When I bought the property, the garage is an existing building already. So what I did, I started changing windows from single pane to 2 panes. I replaced the garage door, and the roof has been changed. For the roof, I did not apply for a permit. I do have a permit for the electrical because I did bring in electrical from the Electrical Safety Authority.
All right. Thank you. You wouldn't know then when the garage was erected. So I wonder, Ms. Evans, do you have any information on?
1955.
All right. So that's why there's no recollection of any permits since 21 years, because that's when we came into existence. All right, Mr. Maddock, are there any questions of the committee of Mr. Maddock?
Sorry. I did I did call the city for a permit to when I put the installation in, and I was told because it was a garage then that the garages don't need permits for installation.
No, and we're finding no fault with you, sir. Looks like you've covered all your bases. So, Ms. Richardson, go ahead. Did you?
Through you. So was the second story already added to the garage when you purchased the property, or did you construct that second story?
Mr. Maddock, go ahead.
The second story, yes, sorry. The second story was constructed with no permit.
Did you say with or without a permit?
Without a permit.
Now, the question was a permit required to add that second story?
Perhaps the chief building official could address that.
Ms. Murchison, are you there? You've heard the conversation, and we're inquiring with respect to a permit for the second story addition.
Yes, through the chair. It appears from the information the applicant has provided that a permit was required because he's talking about replacing a roof and creating a second story. So that would require a building permit. So to kind of loop that into a previous comment or question that was coming from the committee, at the time that we resolve this now pending permit for the conversion, if it's permitted through this variance, we will also be addressing that construction at the same time. And as a result, there will be building permit penalty fees associated with that building permit component that are written into our building bylaws. So it doesn't need to come in as a condition through this variance per se, because we will be addressing that at our end.
Well said. Thank you very much for that, Ms. Murchison. Okay, yeah, all right. Work here on that. All right. Ma'am, you're finished now, ma'am. Now, I would ask, if you have further questions, you might want to contact our planning department. Perhaps they could help you, but no further discussions today, okay? But if you wish to contact our planning department, you may do that if you have further questions. And I think Ms. Archer's information to you, advice was very good. So I'll leave that with you, all right? And again, thank you for coming. All right, committee, I think we've been through the process. We're looking at an amended motion from, I believe it's the, yeah, just the one, but there's a third. Do you want to give us that third condition again, Ms. Evans, please?
Yes. It is to read that prior to the issuance of a building permit, the owner will undergo an entrance review and/or entrance permit application to ensure the entrance meets the current bylaw 2017-151 to the satisfaction of the Public Works Roads Division.
All right, thank you for that. So we're all clear on, so the amendment is, or the motion is as amended. So can I get someone to move that? Mr. Strangway, do I have a seconder? Ms. Archer? I was asking for a move, yeah, and you put your hand up. You're not going to move it?
I'm trying to help out here, Mr. Chair. I believe you had the applicant online. Did you want to ask if there's anybody else online opposed to or in favor of? Okay.
But thank you for, keeps me in line. I need a motion then as amended. Mr. Strangway, were you going to do that? And I have a seconder by Mrs. Archer. All right. Any further comments or questions with respect to that motion? All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Moving right along, we're now dealing with, I'll get my glasses on so I can see. File number D20-2023-004. This is 13 Fieldview Drive, Geographic Township of Bexley. And again, Ms. Evans, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Yes, the subject property, being 13 Fieldview Drive, is designated waterfront under the City of Kawartha Lakes official plan and is zoned Limited Service Residential, or LSR zone, under the Township of Bexley zoning bylaw 93-09. The subject property is located in a residential neighborhood located on the western shore of Balsam Lake. The area is comprised of a mixture of 1- and 2-story dwellings of varying ages and a lot fabric with lots of varying sizes. The lots to the north and south of the subject property are of a comparable size to the subject property. The property currently contains a 1-story dwelling, which was constructed in 1951 according to Municipal Property Assessment Corporation. The purpose of this application is to facilitate the demolition of the existing 1-story single detached dwelling and the construction of a new 2-story single detached dwelling on the existing foundation. The proposed 2-story dwelling will vertically add living space while remaining within the existing footprint. The subject property is considered undersized based on the current requirements of the zoning bylaw, as a minimum of 800 square meters is required, The property is 485.62 meters in size, square meters in size. Looking at some construction drawings now, the drawing on the left is the east elevation and shows what the dwelling would look like from the water side of the property. And the drawing on the right shows the dwelling from the road side. These drawings show the proposed dwelling from a side view from each side. The photo on the left here shows the existing dwelling, which is to be replaced, and the photo on the right shows the rear yard and the distance between the dwelling and the water. In this photo, the subject property is the dwelling in the center, so it's the center property. The photo shows the neighboring dwellings as well, with the dwelling on the left being a 2-story dwelling for comparison. The subject property is considered undersized based on the current requirements of the zoning bylaw, as a minimum of 800 square meters is required. At its current size, the lot has supported a residential use, and the proposal is for this to continue. The neighborhood contains a mixture of 1- and 2-story dwellings, including the directly abutting properties, and therefore the proposed 2-story dwelling will not be out of character with the surrounding neighborhood. Looking to the official plan, the property is designated waterfront, and low-density residential uses are permitted within this designation, with performance and siting criteria being implemented through the zoning bylaw. As per policy 20.3.10, building height maximums should ensure that buildings maintain a low profile, do not exceed the height of the tree canopy, and blend with the natural surroundings. The proposed height does not exceed the trees in the area, complies with the maximum height implemented by the zoning bylaw, and is not out of character for the neighborhood. The subject property is zoned limited service residential zone, under which a single detached dwelling is a permitted use. The proposal complies with all zone provisions, with the exception of the minimum lot area required by section 3.11.1. This provision allows development on undersized lots to occur provided a minimum lot area of 800 square meters can be met, and development on existing lots of record that cannot meet this minimum lot area requirement must be evaluated through a Planning Act application on their own merits to determine whether the property can support the required servicing and to ensure the proposed development will not result in land use conflicts or adverse impacts to massing or neighborhood character. The minimum lot area requirements also ensure the maintenance of adequate landscaped open space for amenity space and stormwater infiltration. The subject property currently contains a residential use with a new dwelling proposed. The new dwelling will be situated on the existing footprint, and therefore the same amount of landscaped open space that exists today will be maintained, providing adequate area for amenity space and infiltration. Additionally, the Building and Septic Division has confirmed that though the existing septic tank will need to be upgraded to accommodate the additional living space, there is adequate space on the property for an additional tank to be added or for the existing tank to be replaced with a larger model. There are no anticipated impacts on environmental features, neighboring properties, or the function of the right-of-way. Comments were received from the supervisor of Part 8 sewage systems stating that the existing Class 5 holding tank will be undersized for the proposal and that the tank will need to be upgraded to continue with redevelopment. There is adequate space on the property to add an additional tank or to replace the current tank with a larger model, and therefore the Building and Septic Division has no concern with the minor variance approval being endorsed as it relates to private on-site sewage disposal. Comments were received from Kawartha Region Conservation Authority stating that they have no concerns with the proposal and that a permit will be required from them. After the writing of the report, comments were received from the Building and Septic Division's plans examiner stating that there is an outstanding building permit relating to the foundation, but it is not relevant to what is being proposed, and therefore the plans examiner stated that there are no concerns. Based on the contents of the report, staff acknowledges the application meets all 4 tests of a variance and respectfully recommends approval of the application subject to the conditions identified within the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. No stage would be complete without added props. Would you not agree? All right, are there any questions of the planner? All right, is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application? Yes, Mr. Lennox, I had you written down here too. How's that? All right, go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, city staff. Stephen Lennox is my name. I'm the current owner of this property, looking to redevelop it from a single dilapidated 1-story to a nice modern 2-story facility. I've spoke with all my neighbors there, showed them all my plans, and they're all liking the new update that hopefully will happen. So I'm here today to speak to any concerns that anybody has here today.
All right, sir. Thank you for taking the time. We appreciate your comments. Are there any questions of the applicant? Mr. Erickson?
The holding tank, if it has to be enlarged, that's just based on the square footage. There won't necessarily be more occupants. So it's just a regulation based on square footage?
So the holding tank size is based on a number of bedrooms, number of fixtures that are located within the unit. So the unit now has 2 bedrooms. My proposal is 3 bedrooms, more washrooms, more taps, laundry, so that all adds up, which doesn't comply with the holding tank that is currently there.
Yeah, I think they indicated in the report that there would be increased flow, so that was the reason for you having to upgrade.
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Anything further from committee? All right. Being none, thank you, sir. We appreciate that. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Opposition to the application? Being none, committee. Ms. Richardson.
As recommended by staff.
All right. Do I have a seconder? Mrs. Archer? Are there any further comments or questions with the motion on the floor? Mr. Steinway? No. I'm catching you every time. Yeah. Some days that's not hard, believe me. All those in favor? Oh, Ms. Gar. Ah, there it is. All right. Thank you. That carries. All right. We'll do one more, then I think we'll take a little break. How's that sound? So we're dealing with file number D20-2023-005, and this is 3015 County Road 36, the geographic township of Burlum.
Thank you. Yes, the subject property, being 3015 County Road 36, is designated rural and environmental protection under the City of Kawartha Lakes official plan, and is zoned residential type 1 or R1 zone under the Township of Burlum zoning bylaw 6-87. The subject property is located in an area which contains residential and agricultural uses. The property contains a single detached dwelling and accessory structures including a detached garage, gazebo, tent shelter, and garden shed. The portion of the property farthest from the road is relatively cleared, and the front portion of the property is heavily vegetated with mature trees. The purpose of this application is to facilitate the construction of a shed in the front yard, the proposed location of which is identified by the red circle on the sketch. Section 5.1.3b of the bylaw permits accessory structures in residential zones to be located within interior side or rear yards. The proposed location of the shed is the front yard. The photo on the left was taken from approximately the edge of the driveway looking east, with the proposed location of the shed just beyond these trees here. So just beyond those trees. I can go to this side as well. The photo on the right was taken standing in front of the proposed location of the shed, looking back towards the dwelling and other accessory structures on the west side of the property. This photo shows the proposed location of the shed, with County Road 36 being just beyond those trees. The photo on the left was taken from the road looking into the property, and the existing garden shed is on the other side of this vegetation. So it's tricky to see, but there's kind of a darker patch in the photo, so that's where the existing garden shed is. So this demonstrates the effectiveness of the visual screening of that vegetation, even when we're in a time when there's no leaves on the trees. The photo on the right was taken further east down the road on the opposite side of the vegetation from the proposed location of the new shed. And these trees and other types of vegetation along the road and on the property will render the shed virtually undetectable. The proposed shed will provide a permanent storage solution on the property. The shed is to be used to store a boat and a trailer, as well as lawn care equipment, and will protect these items from weather while keeping them out of sight. The property is designated rural and environmental protection under the City of Kawartha Lakes official plan, and the proposed shed, as well as all existing buildings and structures on the property, are located within the portion of the property designated rural. Low-density residential uses, along with accessory uses, are anticipated within this designation, and performance and siting criteria is implemented through the zoning bylaw. The subject property is zoned residential type 1, and residential uses and associated accessory structures are permitted. The proposal complies with all zone provisions with the exception of the permitted location for accessory structures as provided by section 5.1.3b of the bylaw, which states that in a residential zone, accessory buildings or structures shall not be erected in any yard other than the interior side or rear yard. As such, accessory buildings and structures are not permitted in the front yard. The bylaw defines the front yard as the yard extending across the full width of the lot between the front lot line and the nearest part of the main building on the lot. On this slide, the approximate yards are illustrated with the rear yard in blue, the interior side yards in orange, and the front yard in green. So as you can see, the majority of the property consists of front yard, limiting the areas of the property where an accessory structure would be permitted. The intent of limiting the location of accessory structures to the interior side or rear yard is to ensure accessory uses remain subordinate to the primary use by being located in less visible areas on the property. Locating accessory structures in the interior side or rear yard also ensures there is adequate amenity space in the front yard, and the property is in keeping with the character of the rest of the neighborhood. Due to the visual screening from the road that is provided by the proposed setback, as well as the thick vegetative buffer, the presence of the proposed shed would be negligible when viewing the property from the road, and the dwelling will remain the visually predominant use on the property. There are no anticipated impacts on environmental features, neighboring properties, or the function of the right-of-way. Comments were received from the supervisor of Part 8 sewage system stating that a site visit was conducted to review the location of the sewage system, and it was determined that the location of the proposed shed will not encroach on the existing sewage system, and therefore the Building and Septic Division has no concerns with the minor variance application as it relates to private on-site sewage disposal. Based on the contents of the report, staff acknowledges the application meets all 4 tests of a minor variance and respectfully recommends approval of the application subject to the conditions identified within the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Questions of the planner?
You, please, to Ms. Evans. Is there no limit to the number of outbuildings that can be had on this property?
So under the Township of through the chair, under the Township of Verulem zoning bylaw, it's a percentage rather than a number. So some zoning bylaws do have a percentage and usually a maximum of 3. In Verulem, it is just a percentage. And I think the maximum lot coverage for accessory structures is 10%. The proposed is 2.64%.
Anything further from committee? All right, all right. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application? No. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of the application? Support of the application. Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Opposition to the application. Being none, committee. Mr. Strangway?
As recommended by staff.
Do I have a seconder? Ms. Richardson? All right. Any further comments or questions? All right. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank 08 Thurstonia Road. We've kept you long enough. I'm going to ask the committee if they'll move this up. So I want a motion, or I'd like a motion, all right, that we take 3.2.8 and move it to follow 3.2.5. Can I get that motion? All right. So Mr. Erickson, seconded by Mr. Richardson. All those in favor? And that carries. All right, sir, we'll deal with yours now. So we're dealing with file number D20-2023-010, and this is 2308 Thurstonia Road, Geographic Township of Verulem. Ms. Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me just get a little organized here. I apologize. Okay, thank you. The subject property, being 2308 Thurstonia Road, is zoned residential type 1 under the Township of Verulem zoning bylaw and is designated waterfront under the City of Kawartha Lake's official plan. The subject property fronts onto Thurstonia Road, a municipally improved public street. The purpose and effect of the application is to facilitate the construction of a single detached dwelling and seek relief from the rear yard setback. The subject property is located southeast of the intersection of Thurstonia Road and Ken Hill Beach Road. The existing residential neighborhood is characterized as a waterfront community with undersized residential lots adjacent to the southeast shore of Upper Sturgeon Lake. The subject property currently contains a one-story single detached dwelling circa 1930. This dwelling will be demolished to facilitate the construction of a new one-story single detached house and detached garage. A detached accessory structure, being a garage, is also contemplated in the future, but is not subject to this application. Image number 1 above was taken from across the street, from the intersection of Ken Hill Beach Road and Thurstonia Road, and it looks towards the existing dwelling, which is shown in closer detail in figure number 2. The subject property experiences a grade change in the north-south direction, sloping downwards towards Ken Hill Beach Road. The single detached dwelling is proposed in the general same location as it exists today, making use of the lot's existing driveway and entrance. Utilizing the lot's existing entrance maintains a generous separation distance between its access point and the intersection of Thurstonia Road and Ken Hill Beach Road, reducing the likelihood of traffic disturbances. The grade of the lot creates an opportunity for an elevated deck off the house's north wall that provides views to Sturgeon Lake. The subject property's east and south lot lines abut a large agricultural lot, and the dwelling on the neighboring lot is located approximately 400 meters away from the proposed dwelling at 2308 Thurstonia Road. This extensive separation distance, as well as the mature vegetation and trees that line the east lot line, will buffer the view of the proposed dwelling. Based on these considerations, the variance is considered desirable and appropriate for the use of the land. The subject property is designated waterfront under the City of Kawartha Lake's official plan. Low-density residential uses and buildings are permitted in the waterfront designation. Performance and siting criteria are implemented through the zoning bylaw. Therefore, the variance maintains the general intent and purpose of the official plan. The subject property is zoned residential type 1 under the Township of Verlam zoning bylaw. Section 8.2G of the bylaw requires a minimum rear yard setback of 7.5 meters. Rear yard setbacks of 1.5 meters, 1.92 meters, and 2.03 meters are proposed, and you can see those three measurements right here. The intent of the rear yard setback is to provide sufficient rear yard amenity space and reduce land use and privacy conflicts between abutting properties. The proposed rear yard encroachments are not anticipated to pose any land use compatibility issues due to the means of physical and visual separation from neighboring uses. Due to the siting of the single detached dwelling, the subject property's rear yard functions much like a side yard. Conversely, the extensive side yard and front yard provide amenity space, typically associated with the rear yard. As the minimum interior side yard setback is met, access between the front and rear yard is maintained for lot drainage and grading, and to carry out property maintenance. Based on this review, the subject property is considered in keeping with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. The application was circulated to Kawartha Region Conservation Authority. Erosion hazards may be present on the property due to the location within the apparent valley associated with the Sturgeon Lake. Due to the nature of the smaller lot sizes within the community, shallow rear yards of similar depths are common in the abutting subdivision. The proposed development is located completely within a regulated area by KRCA, and as such, a permit will be required under Ontario Regulation 182/06 before any on-site work is completed. As part of the permit submission, the applicant may be required to submit supporting documents to address the natural hazard features that KRCA mentioned. So this is not considered as a condition in the report, as these requirements will be fulfilled through the building permit process in conjunction with the permit with Kawartha Conservation. The drawing on the top left illustrates the minimum rear yard setback and proposed at the northeast corner of the deck, between the deck and the rear lot line. The image on the right shows the approximate location of the proposed septic system. This is considered a constraint on the property and further supports the proposed location of the dwelling unit. The supervisor of Part 8 sewage systems identified a potential conflict with the location of the private sewage disposal system and the proposed future location of the detached garage, which again is not subject to the application. After speaking with the Building and Septic Division, the owner was receptive to modifying the garage to accommodate more space for the sewage system. The owner is currently working through the design revisions with the Building and Septic Division in order to be able to issue the septic permit at the end of the appeal period. Based on our review, there are no anticipated impacts on environmental features, neighboring properties, or the function of the right-of-way concerning access, drainage, or streetscaping. Therefore, the variance is considered minor in nature. No comments of objection or concern were received by circulated agencies or members of the public. Based on the contents of the report, staff acknowledges the application meets all 4 tests of a minor variance, and staff respectfully recommends approval of the application subject to the conditions identified within the report.
Thank you, Ms. Peck. Questions of the planner? Mr.
To the chair, in Appendix C, which is mentioned as a condition, this application would be approved as per Schedule C. It shows the proposed garage. would that be an assumption that we are endorsing the proposed garage?
The proposed garage is not subject to the application. So any future development would be addressed through the building permit stage. So in this case, no, Appendix C is really just speaking to the purpose of the application, which is the single detached dwelling.
Okay. Anything further from committee? All right. Do you wish to speak to it, Mr. Knight?
There we go. Okay, thank you very much. No, if I any questions that I can answer about that, then fine. And I did speak with the septic about the garage, and we have the 45 off a corner to get up to the square footage required for the mantle on the septic.
All right, thank you, and thank you for taking the time, sir. Are there any further questions of the applicant? Right, being none, is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Opposition to the application? Committee. Mr. Starnwick?
As recommended by staff.
Do I have a seconder? Ms. Archer? All right. Any further comments or questions with respect to the motion on the floor? Being none, all those in favor? And that carries. Your application is approved, sir. Yep.
Thank you very much, and I'd also like to certainly thank your planning department for all the help that they give through this process and whatnot, and it was a pleasurable experience.
Well, that's always good to hear, and we appreciate positive comments with respect to planning staff. They do an excellent job, so thank you for that.
Yes, they certainly do. Thank you.
Let's take 5, folks. Scar, that is just not fair. I bet you're feeling better.
Everyone. I had a
We're not.
I had a snack attack. My apologies.
Not a problem. We were just sitting here drooling. Okay, moving right along then, we're dealing with file number D20-2023-007. And this is 57 Trinity Drive, Geographic Township of Earlham. And we got Ms. Peck. Go ahead, Ms. Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As mentioned, the subject property is municipally addressed as 57 Trinity Drive, located in the geographic township of Earlham. The subject property is zoned limited service residential under the Township of Earlham zoning bylaw and is designated waterfront, environmental protection, and rural under the City of Kawartha Lake's official plan. The subject property is accessed via Trinity Drive, a private road that bisects the property perpendicular, seen right here. The property is a very large waterfront lot, approximately 1.6 acres in size. The applicant is seeking relief from the maximum size and height of an accessory structure, being a private cabin. Please note on the first page of the report, the total size of the private cabin is recorded as 101.54 square meters. However, this should read 132.85 square meters. The subject property is within an established water.
Could I interrupt for 1 second? The background music is still on from the break, so we're having trouble listening.
I apologize.
Okay, I think we're in business now. Yeah, no problem. All right. Sorry, go ahead, Ms. Peck.
Oh, no worries. The subject property is within an established waterfront community located on the northeast shore of Sturgeon Lake, approximately 1.7 kilometers from the intersection of County Road 8 and County Road 30. The subject property currently contains a single detached dwelling and 3 detached accessory structures, being a detached garage, a detached boathouse, and a private cabin. The purpose of the application is to construct a building addition to the existing private cabin. Photo number 1 above shows the property's single detached dwelling as well as the existing cabin and boathouse in the distance. Image number 2 is taken from Trinity Drive, looking towards the lake, and the existing house is on the right and the private cabin is on the left, shielded by mature vegetation. Here is a larger image of the existing cabin, circled in red, and the existing cabin currently contains a sauna and shower, as well as a bedroom. The proposed application will provide a building addition that is used by the owner as extra sleeping space for a growing family, as well as a private art studio. The location of the existing cabin on the site plan is shown here, and the proposed addition is shown in red. The owner is proposing an addition of 101.54 square meters. The proposal will result in 65.13 square meters of additional ground floor area, as well as 36.41 square meters of upper living story space. Above are some elevation drawings with the new construction outlined in red. Based on its definition, a private cabin is considered a dwelling unit under the Earlham zoning bylaw. A dwelling unit is permitted to include habitable rooms, including a bedroom and a room designed for living, such as an art studio. Therefore, the use is permitted as of right, and the variance is considered desirable for the appropriate development or use of the land, building, or structure. The proposed cabin addition is located entirely within the waterfront designation. This designation permits low-density residential uses as well as residential accessory uses in buildings. Performance and siting criteria is implemented through the zoning bylaw. The subject property is located within 120 meters of a buffer of an unevaluated wetland as per Schedule B5 of the City of Kawartha Lake's official plan. The existing private cabin and proposed addition are located completely within an area regulated by Kawartha Region Conservation Authority. As such, a permit will be required through KRCA before any on-site work is completed. As part of the permit submission, the applicant may require supporting documents to address any natural hazard features identified on the property. Therefore, the variance maintains the general intent and purpose of the official plan. The subject property is zoned limited service residential under the Township of Verlem zoning bylaw. Section 5.16 of the bylaw permits one private cabin on eligible lots up to a maximum size of 38 square meters. Section 5.1.5 of the bylaw restricts the height of all accessory structures, including the private cabin, to 5 meters. These provisions intend to ensure that the building itself remains incidental, subordinate, and exclusively devoted to the primary dwelling unit located on the same lot. The subject property is a very large lot, and the existing house has a height and ground floor area of 7.92 meters and 226.68 square meters respectively. The proposed accessory building lot coverage is 4.97% and will remain well below the permitted maximum of 10%. Therefore, the proposed cabin with a height of 6.19 meters and ground floor area of 92.9 square meters will remain subordinate in massing and height compared to the primary residential unit. The proposal complies with all other bylaw provisions related to building setbacks and lot coverage. The cabin is surrounded by mature trees and low-lying vegetation that provide visual screening from the road and between neighboring lots. The site's mature pine trees will provide year-round visual screening and lessen the cabin's perceived height and massing as viewed from Trinity Drive. Based on the lot size and the lot's existing buildings, the size and massing of the proposed cabin is considered appropriate. Based on the review, the variance maintains the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. There are no anticipated impacts on environmental features, neighboring properties, or the function of the right-of-way concerning access, drainage, or streetscaping. Therefore, the variance is considered minor in nature. No comments or objections of concern were received by circulated agencies or members of the public. Based on the contents of the report, staff acknowledges the application meets all 4 tests of a minor variance, and staff respectfully recommends approval of the application subject to the conditions identified within the report.
Thank you, Ms. Peck. Questions of the planner? All right, being none. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application? And your name, sir?
Ryan Hayter.
All right, go ahead, sir.
I'd just like to give my monthly thank you to everybody, and another job well done by Ms. Peck on the visuals. It's pretty easy to explain when you get to see it in that way.
All right, thank you, sir.
Any questions, anybody?
All right. Are there any questions of the applicant? Mr. Erickson, I got a question for you, sir.
Through the chair,
Yes.
the KRCA mentions that you need a permit before any on-site work is completed. Should that say before it's commenced?
Yes, they would have to give us a permit before we can get a building permit.
Yeah, I think that'll probably be addressed through the building permit process with the Conservation Authority, so, all right. All right, any further questions of the applicant? All right, thank you, sir, for taking the time. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Opposition to the application? Being none?
As recommended by staff.
All right, do I have a seconder? Mr. Erickson, any further comments or questions with respect to the motion on the floor? All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Your application is approved, sir. We're now dealing with file number D20-2023-009, and this is 217 Hillside Drive, Geographic Township of Somerville. And again, Ms. Peck, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The subject property is municipally addressed as 217 Hillside Drive and is located in the Geographic Township of Somerville. The subject property is zoned Rural General Zone under the Township of Somerville zoning bylaw and is designated rural under the City of Kawartha Lake's official plan. The subject property has frontage on Hillside Drive, a municipally improved street. The purpose of the application is to facilitate the complete construction of a single detached dwelling, as well as recognize the existing location of the accessory structures located in the front yard. The subject property is located southeast of the intersection of Hillside Drive and Burnt River Road, approximately 25 meters west of the Burnt River Hamlet area. The subject lands are surrounded by large agricultural lots as well as larger residential lots as well. The property contains a one-story single detached dwelling that is currently under construction, approximately 80% complete, as well as 8 accessory buildings and structures, which include 2 sheds, 3 sea-can storage containers, a travel trailer, a privy, and a gazebo. All but two of these structures are located in the front yard in front of the existing house. The first image is taken from the front property line looking towards the single detached dwelling. You can see a number of the accessory buildings in the foreground. The second image is looking west towards the neighboring lot and illustrates the dense woodlands that surround the subject property. After completing the necessary as-constructed foundation control certificate, it was determined that the single detached dwelling was unintentionally built closer to the interior lot line than permitted. The existing one-story single detached dwelling is oriented on a 30-degree angle, making the dwelling's southeast corner the closest portion of the house to the interior lot line, with a setback of 1.58 meters. The dwelling's angled siting means the interior side yard encroachment is largely isolated to the dwelling's southeast corner. It should be mentioned that this was identified through the building permit process, so this was one of the checks and balances made and was found that it was unintentionally constructed closer to the lot line than permitted. The nearly completed dwelling does not have an attached garage. Therefore, the existing accessory structures will provide storage space for outdoor equipment and personal effects. The dwelling is oriented towards the property rear, leaving minimum space in the rear and interior side yard to accommodate accessory buildings. This makes the front yard the logical location for the placement of these structures. The lot's mature vegetation and abundance of trees will act as a visual buffer to shield the view of these structures from the road and neighboring lots. Based on this, the variance is considered desirable for the appropriate development of the land. The subject property is designated rural in the City of Kawartha Lake's official plan. Performance and siting criteria are implemented through the zoning bylaw. The subject property is located completely within an unevaluated wetland as per Schedule B-7 of the City of Kawartha Lake's official plan. As such, Kawartha Region Conservation Authority suggested a technical study be requested to identify hazard areas associated with potential flooding or unstable soils. Because the site is an existing lot on record and is already built out, the merit of requiring such a study is considered minimal. Outside of this Planning Act application, nothing in the building permit process would normally trigger the need for such a technical study. As such, planning staff have not included this as one of the conditions of approval. Based on this review, the variance is considered in keeping with the general intent and purpose of the official plan. The subject property is zoned rural general, which permits residential uses in buildings as well as residential accessory buildings. Section 2.2J of the bylaw requires the minimum side yard setback of 3 meters and a setback of 1.58 meters is constructed. A bylaw may establish a minimum side yard setback in order to mitigate the impacts of water drainage on neighboring lots, to ensure yard equipment can be easily moved from the property's front and rear yards, to ensure the side of a dwelling can be maintained without encroaching onto a neighbor's yard, for instance. The as-constructed dwelling is located away from other dwellings on neighboring lots, reducing the impact of water runoff. Additionally, the property's east interior side yard is 22.42 meters in width, providing ample space to move equipment between the front and rear yards. Lastly, the single detached dwelling's angled siting will allow property maintenance to take place wholly on the subject property without encroachment. To facilitate the proposal, 6 of the existing 8 accessory structures will be removed or demolished. The buildings that will be removed are illustrated on the site plan with an X, and the retained buildings are colored in green. 2 of the 3 retained buildings are located in the front yard. The applicant is seeking relief from section 18.1.2A of the bylaw, which permits accessory structures in the interior yard and rear yard only. The bylaw restricts the yard location of an accessory structure in support of a consistent and unobstructed built form adjacent to the street edge, and to ensure the lot is built out in a logical and non-scattered manner. The remaining accessory structures are located beyond the required front yard setback of 7.5 meters and will be screened from view by the property's dense vegetation and mature trees. The remaining accessory structures are located on the lot's east side and will not obscure the view of the single detached dwelling from the driveway or the street. Therefore, the placement of these buildings appears to be thoughtful rather than ad hoc. Based on this review, the variance meets the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. The dwelling has been constructed, therefore there are no anticipated impacts on environmental features, neighboring properties, or the function of the right-of-way with respects to access, drainage, streetscaping, and maintenance. Therefore, the variance is considered minor in nature. No comments of concerns or objections were received by circulated agencies other than the ones I mentioned about Kawartha Region Conservation Authorities, and no comments of objection were received by members of the public. Based on the contents of the report, staff acknowledges the application meets all 4 tests of a minor variance, and staff respectfully recommends approval of the application subject to the conditions identified within the report.
Thank you again, Ms. Peck. Are there any questions to the planner?
Through you, on condition 3, if this is approved, indicates that 6 of the 8 existing accessory structures will be removed, but you've identified only 5 on the scale up on the screen.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that comment. It should be 5 because they are permitted to have up to 3 accessory buildings. So that will be an amendment to that condition.
Further questions or of the planner? All right. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application?
Yes, Kevin Worsley speaking.
Go ahead, sir.
Just one of your conditions there. It says that it's a new build that's being built. So I'm waiting on I'm waiting on a final inspection from the city of Kawartha Lakes to move forward with my to satisfy my lender, and the accessory buildings are kind of standing in the way of that. Ms. Peck's giving me 24 months to satisfy, I guess, the city by having the property finalized, as well as the accessory buildings moved. I'm just wondering about a little bit of relief for maybe 1 or 2 of the accessory buildings and move ahead with maybe a conditional final inspection, so that I can keep firewood dry until that time.
Ms. Peck, do you want to address that?
Yeah, I'd just like, through you, Mr. Chair, I would ask the applicant clarify on the request. Is he looking for an extension in the permitted amount of time to clear the conditions of variance? Or is he looking to retain specific buildings that are otherwise identified as being removed?
Can you clarify that for us, sir?
Yes, sir. I guess what I'm trying to get is my final inspection done as soon as possible, meaning the inspector comes in, inspects it, I get my final inspection, I can produce that to my lender without removing.
Yeah, we can't address, sorry, sir, we can't address the timelines with respect to an inspection, but we can discuss that third permit condition. And I think the planner asked to you to clarify exactly what you're looking for on that third condition.
Oh, okay. So basically, I'm gonna remove what we discussed, but these buildings may not be removed until after the final inspection is done. So what I'm asking for is a conditional final inspection before those buildings are moved.
Can we wait until the final?
In abundance of caution, I'll defer to the building division to speak on their half and then confer with planning staff.
Ms. Murchison, are you there? You've heard the comments from the applicant. Would you respond, please?
Yeah, so through the chair, there's a couple of comments I'll make with respect to the wording of that condition, and that is to tie removal of buildings to occupancy inspection. Building Code Act won't allow us to do that. So if someone requests an occupancy inspection and we do not attend within 10 days, or if there is nothing building code related outstanding, after 10 days, it's deemed occupied and that's deemed passed. That is the one inspection that the Building Code Act regulates heavily. So if the applicant is looking to retain the buildings past what the condition is reading now, I think it's going to be a rejig completely that the planning staff will have to determine how to word it, because they really shouldn't be tagged to an occupancy permit for us to be successful in keeping those and getting those buildings removed at a certain period in time, because occupancy is a quirky inspection that we can't hold up for any reason other than a certain defined list in the building code.
So, Ms. Peck? No rush. If you need time, discuss it. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're just going to take a minute to discuss.
There are no concerns over time taken for these because we need to make a decision based on the proper information, so take your time.
Through the chair, if I can add one more comment that might help planning staff. Depending on the size of the structures that are being removed, if they're of a size that requires a building permit, that can be one other trigger to assist with you. You could have them take out their demolition permits, and then we have the ability to enforce those permits. However, that doesn't work if the structures are less than 10 square meters.
And thank you for that, Ms. Murchison. See the planners nodding, so thank you. We're discussing some options here, Mr. Worsley, so hang in if you would, please.
Sure, if I may speak again, just so Ms. Peck knows, basically the one I really want to just leave there is a shed that is full of firewood that I can't really burn or don't really want to take my energy to move in the next 6 months. This is a property that I don't live in or will not live in for the next probably 6 months, but.
All right, I'll just ask you to hold there until the planners are free to hear you. Thank you.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to pose a question to the building division, the chief building official, based on section 18.2 of the bylaw, speaking to construction uses and a building or a structure on the lot that can be used for construction purposes until the work is complete. Could this woodshed be satisfied through that provision?
Ms. Murchison, go ahead.
Through the chair, really normally, I'm going to sound strange here, but I would defer back to planning for that interpretation. But historically, usually we use those clauses for things like a tool shed where they want to keep their tools protected while they're building because they're related to the actual construction. Firewood's a little tricky to relate to your construction, but that would be planning's call, I think.
Mr. Chair, I completely agree with the CBO's comment. If there is any opportunity for the owner to indicate that there is some chance or perhaps even a likelihood that some of that wood may be used in the renovation, I think it could quite nicely fall under that provision in the bylaw.
All right, Mr. Worsley, you heard those comments. Is there a possibility you're intending to use some of that wood as part of your construction?
Yeah, there's definitely some wood in there that I could use.
Ms. Beck.
All right, thank you. So the condition as written would stand, with the exception of that structure would be satisfied under condition or satisfied by provision 18.3 under the zoning bylaw.
So you're suggesting that the third stand as it was with the 5? Is that what I'm hearing?
Including the text that would state exempting the structure. Oh, under 18.3 of the bylaw. So like structure, I guess it's not identified here, but the wood structure, wood storage structure.
All right, so how is that condition going to read then?
Sorry, we're going to take another moment.
Again, I'll say we're here not just to make decisions, but informed decisions. So we'll take our time.
Okay, thank you for that indulgence. So the condition would read, 5 of the 8 existing accessory structures, as generally identified in Appendix D, be removed prior to the issuance of the final building inspection, with the exception of the 9 by 12 wood storage shed permitted to remain under Section 18.2 of the bylaw.
So there's no timeline on that then under the bylaw?
Based on Section 18.2 of the bylaw, it would be 3 months.
Mr. Worsley, are you still there?
Yes, sir.
All right. I'm going to ask the planner to read again the condition for you because there has been an option created as a result of your woodshed. So go ahead, Ms. Peck. Listen carefully, Mr. Worsley.
Yeah, will do.
Okay, so for clarity, Section 18.2 refers to a building that is necessary for the work in progress to be completed, and it may stay on the property until the work is completed or abandoned for 3 or more months. So this is how the condition will read. 5 of the 8 existing accessory structures, as generally identified in Appendix D, be removed prior to the issuance of the final building inspection, with the exception of the 9 by 12 wood storage shed permitted to remain under Section 18.2 of the bylaw.
Mr. Worsley, were you clear on that?
Very clear, thank you.
All right. Best to help you out there, so. All right.
Thanks so much.
All right. Are there any, where am I at here? Are there any further questions of the planner? Yes, Ms. Sargent.
Through you two, please, to the planner, just for clarification. So just because we mentioned Section 18.2, that puts a time limit on how long this woodshed can stay there?
Through the chair, that's correct. So 18.2 permits the wood storage shed to remain on the property until the building completion on the single detached dwelling is complete, in which it has 3 months after that time to be removed.
You're clear on that, Mr. Worsley?
Yes, I am.
All right, thank you. Did you wish to say anything further with respect to the application?
No, thanks so much for hearing, and sorry to put you all through that.
Not a problem. Thank you for taking the time. All right. Are there any further questions of the applicant? All right. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? Support of the application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Opposition to the application? Being none, and we're looking at an amended motion. Mr. Richards, do I have a seconder? Mr. Strangway? Any further comments or questions with respect to the amended motion on the floor? Being none, all those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Your application is approved, sir, with the added amendment.
Thank you.
All right, moving right along, and last but not least, we're dealing with D20-2023-011, and this is 788 and 790 Indian Point Road, Geographic Township of Bexley. Ms. Peck, you're on again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The subject property is municipally addressed as 788 and 790 Indian Point Road, located in the Geographic Township of Bexley. The subject property is zone limited service residential under the Township of Bexley zoning bylaw and designated waterfront under the City of Kawartha Lake's official plan. The subject property is located on Indian Point Road, which is a private street. The purpose of the application is the construction of a detached accessory structure greater in height and area than permitted under the zoning bylaw. The subject property is located along the north shores of Balsam Lake, south of Indian Point Provincial Park. The property currently contains a single detached dwelling circa 1951 with an attached garage, as well as a small wood storage shed. The existing single detached house is used as a multi-generation cottage, and the owner is proposing a new detached garage to enclose the family's various watercrafts and recreational vehicles. Please disregard the location of arrow number 1 here. It should be closer to the dwelling, located approximately, I was probably standing about here, which represents the view in figure 1, showing the existing cottage, while standing on the driveway to the right of where the garage is proposed. Figure number 2 is taken looking northeast, where you can see the lot is heavily treed. Indian Point Provincial Park is located on the east side of Indian Point Road, meaning there is only one tier of waterfront development and no concern about blocking backlot properties' view to the water. The applicant is seeking relief from the bylaw's maximum height and lot area coverage for accessory structures to facilitate the construction of a detached garage. The requested increase in accessory building height is in part to accommodate the owner's wakeboard boat, which features a tall tower that requires a minimum garage door height of 3.66 meters. A height variance will also facilitate the construction of an upper level storage loft that creates a secure and dry location for the storage of life jackets, snowmobile gear, as well as water toys and patio furniture. The applicant has confirmed that no human habitation will take place within the accessory structure, notwithstanding the building's residential character featuring upper-level dormers. The garage dormers, as well as window placements, are used to encourage a rural residential aesthetic with more cohesive neighborhood style. Based on these considerations, the variance is considered desirable and appropriate for the use of the land. The subject property is designated waterfront under the City of Kawartha Lake's official plan. Low-density residential uses, as well as accessory uses and buildings, are permitted within the waterfront designation. Performance and siting criteria is implemented through the zoning bylaw. The application was circulated to Kawartha Region Conservation Authority. The subject property is located within an area of known karst and is subject to potential flooding and or erosion hazards due to the water level fluctuation on Balsam Lake. As such, a permit is required before any on-site work is completed. The permit submission may require the completion of additional technical studies to address KRCA's natural hazard and geotechnical concerns, which is represented in Condition 3 of the report. These requirements have been shared with the applicant, and they are aware that a geotechnical study will likely be required as part of the permit process through KRCA. Based on a review, the variance maintains the general intent and purpose of the official plan. The subject property is zone limited service residential under the Township of Bexley zoning bylaw. The LSR zone permits residential uses and accessory uses. Section 3.1.3 of the bylaw permits a maximum accessory building lot coverage of up to 8%, up to a maximum of 225 square meters. The applicant is proposing an accessory building lot coverage of 308.19 square meters, which recognizes an existing wood storage enclosure as well as the proposed garage. Although the proposed lot coverage exceeds the allowable square footage, it remains well within the recommended lot coverage ratio of 8%, representing only 4.24% of the total lot area. A bylaw may limit an accessory building's coverage to encourage a cohesive built form by reducing the likelihood of multiple structures placed ad hoc or scattered across the property. The proposal contemplates only 2 accessory structures, and the bulk of the proposed coverage is confined to the one building, the detached garage. The proposed garage appears logically placed as it abuts an existing driveway and is located to the dwelling side to preserve the view of the house from the street. The proposed variance is considered appropriate given the existing lot size, and the garage will remain subordinate in overall size compared to the existing dwelling. Section 3.1.3.2 of the bylaw permits a maximum accessory building height of 5 meters. A height of 6.56 meters is proposed. As previously mentioned, this height will help accommodate the owner's personal watercrafts and recreational vehicles and create an upper-level storage area. The image above on the left here illustrates the extent of the owner's storage needs and illustrates a number of recreational vehicles stored on the ground floor of the garage. The bylaw limits the height of an accessory building or structure to protect the privacy, view, and daylighting of neighboring lots. The proposal well exceeds the bylaw's minimum building setbacks, therefore negative effects related to privacy, views, and shadowing are not anticipated. The subject property has an abundance of tall and mature trees, estimated to be around 12 meters in height. The height of the surrounding vegetation and the expansive front yard setback will help reduce the garage's perceived height from the street, as well as buffer inward views of the garage from neighboring lots. In the image above, I'm standing on the northeast corner looking towards the road. I have superimposed the south elevation drawing to illustrate the view of the garage as seen from this corner of the house. In this image, I'm standing in front of the covered wood storage structure on the west side of the lot looking east. The red dashed line is meant to represent the siding of the garage located in line with the northeast corner of the existing house. Based on our review, the variance maintains the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. The neighborhood's existing character is defined by large waterfront properties, the majority of which contain detached accessory structures in the front yard. For instance, the property municipally addressed as 754 Indian Point Road has a detached garage that appears to exceed the bylaw's maximum height allowance. These taller accessory structures attempt to provide visual interest with architectural features such as dormers that break up the roofline and reduce the building's perceived massing from the street. Roofline articulation also improves the residential character of these buildings, enhancing the visual cohesiveness of the neighborhood. The image on the right at 670 Indian Point Road is a very similar proposal that's down the street. So similar styles also exist. Similar roof lines also exist in the neighborhood. There are no anticipated impacts on environmental features, neighboring properties, or the function of the right-of-way concerning access, drainage, or streetscaping and maintenance. Therefore, the variance is considered minor in nature. No additional comments of concern or objection were received by the circulated agencies or members of the public. Based on the contents of the report, staff acknowledges the application meets all 4 tests of a minor variance, and staff respectfully recommends approval of the application subject to the conditions identified within the report.
Thank you, Ms. Peck. Questions of the planner? Mr. Strand?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you, I'm just wondering about the recommendation from Kawartha Conservation again. This is in a fairly stable area of Balsam Lake. Balsam Lake has very little variance as far as the water level, and flooding is not known around the lake, and yet there seems to be quite a detailed report application regarding flooding, and this garage is well back behind the house, away from the lake. I wondered if you can shed any light on that.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I have connected with Kawartha Region Conservation Authority. They have identified an area of known karst, so unstable bedrock. That is primarily where their concern arises from, and the need for the geotechnical study on their end is being requested. That's being requested as part of the permit process. So it was added as a condition as kind of an abundance of caution, but it will be something that will be addressed through the building permit process and through their permit process through KRCA.
Mr. Strong?
Just a question to you, Mr. Chair. Does this committee have the authority to remove a condition?
We do, but I guess the only thing I would suggest you do is this. They don't usually come out and be as straightforward as saying they do not support the variance if in fact we don't agree to the condition. So my concern would be that if we do that, what position are we putting them in, and what position are we putting the planners in? I guess, Ms. Peck, could you speak to that? Because that's one of the first I've seen where the Conservation Authority has actually said they will not support the minor variance if in fact the condition isn't there. So could you speak to it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, whether the condition is there or not, this is a technical study that is requested by KRCA as part of their permit process. They are making a comment as it is a natural hazard feature on the property, and in support of their request, I have added it as a condition. I have spoken to KRCA, and they have identified the area is known karst, and they have provided mapping to this effect as well. So I'm in support of keeping the condition.
I think I might struggle with a motion to bring it out too. No.
Okay, I'm okay with that right now, thank you.
Anything further of the planner? All right. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application?
Hi, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, what is your name?
Hi, my name's Cassie Harris.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Design. I'm the agent acting on behalf of the owner, Bruce Brock. And I just wanted to say that we are in disagreement with the comment in regards to the karst, but I had followed up with Ms. Peck. She's followed up with Kawartha. It's just very confusing to us, as we did apply for a minor variance in 2019 for a detached garage, for a height variance in the same location, and that never came up at all. So we're just wondering, why is it an issue in 2023 when it was not an issue in 2019? Has the mapping changed? We don't know, but we are prepared to bring a soil engineer out.
All right, and thank you for that. I guess you'd have to take that up with the Conservation Authority, I would suggest, if there are questions with respect to that issue. But anything further you wish to say to the application?
I'm here to answer any questions if there are any.
Okay. Are there any questions of the applicant, Mr. Strangway?
Hi. So you've had some conversation with Kawartha Conservation about this condition, have you?
I personally have not. It's something that Ms. Peck called me about and we spoke about, and she did her due diligence and followed up with Kawartha Conservation. Again, my clients and I are just a little confused why it didn't come up in 2019.
During this process for a minor application, you actually haven't had a chance to talk to Kawartha Conservation as of yet?
We personally have not, but there is correspondence through Ms. Peck from Kawartha Conservation showing the mapping, showing the red area that our entire lot is karst. Again, to be debated, and soil reports will show what is there.
I appreciate your concern. Thank you for your comments.
Which I think just further enhances the fact that you, Ms. Harris, probably should be speaking to your client there and speaking directly with Kawartha Conservation. And there may be some options you can explore there other than, but at this point in time, it's Kawartha Conservation you're going to have to deal with.
And we will do that. Thank you very much, Chair.
All right. Did you? Guess not. All right. And there's any further questions of the applicant? All right. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Opposition to the application? Committee. Mr. Strangway? Go ahead.
Has there ever been any discussion about having a representative from Kawartha Conservation at these meetings when they make a recommendation such as this?
Actually, they used to appear here on a regular basis, and I'm not sure what, Ms. Berry, did you want to speak to that? They used to be here regularly, and then it stopped. But I agree with Mr. Strangway, especially so when there's a bit of an issue. It'd be nice to have someone here to actually speak to it.
Mr. Chair, yeah, this is news to me, but I'm certainly intrigued and will include that in my upcoming meeting with KRCA staff. I know there's been sort of an evolution in process, of course, and staffing resources and constraints on staffing resources, but we'll see what we can determine and when that decision was made to no longer have participation, at least at the meeting, beyond the participation KRCA has through review and discussion with our staff.
Actually, the representative that was here was extremely helpful, so it would be really nice to have them back. Not necessarily at every committee meeting, but as you suggest, if there's something specific like this where they're actually saying they would not support the variance if this wasn't followed through with. So yeah, I would appreciate if you can follow up with that, or the committee would appreciate it. So thank you for that. I'm looking for a motion. Mr. Erickson.
As written with the conditions.
All right. Do I have a seconder? Do I have a second? Ms. Archer. All right. Any further comments or questions with respect to the motion on the floor? Mr. Strangway.
I would just continue to express my concern for this applicant that, you know, knowing the area as well as I think I do, it is with great hesitation that I put my hand up to approve this without somebody from Kawartha Conservation here and to provide more information.
No, and I do hear you, but I think given the fact that the applicant is going to speak with the Conservation Authority directly, there may be some resolution with respect to that technical study. So anything further comment-wise? All those in favor? And that carries. Opposed? One opposed. All right. Very good. I think that finishes off everything we have here. No consents. Under other business, anything from staff under other business?
Not today, Mr. Chair.
How about committee? Anything under other business? Ms. Archer?
Their business, but I wanted to ask, what is karst?
It's my understanding that it relates to unstable bedrock.
Oh, so it's nothing to do with flooding is what they're...
No, it's a geotechnical concern.
Thank you.
Anything further from? Yeah. Why, we would expect nothing less from Ms. Archer.
Do I get a raise?
Sure, you had to bring that up. Anything else from committee? I'm starting to sound like a broken record about you guys, but I'll tell you, your visuals are excellent and your presentations are excellent. I don't know, they really are. And I think I can speak on behalf of the committee when I say thank you for what you're doing. We really appreciate it. All right.
Lloyd, is it just a coincidence that it's 3 women?
Yeah, I don't, well, how shall I respond? Very well done, you 3 ladies. Yeah, my mistake today, with respect to the 3 folks that were here, I would like to, and I've done it in the past, I've moved up those applications so we don't, and I didn't do it, we just got tied up, but I thought about it for the last gentleman. So if you're content with this, I think if we do get, and that's the first time in a long time we've had anyone here, but if we do get someone here, be it the applicant or be it someone that wants to speak, are you okay with juggling the agenda? Because I think, staff, is that a problem for you? None? All right. So then we'll do that. And if I happen to forget it here when I'm going on, somebody say, let's move these up. So I would really appreciate that. So, all right. Other than that, I guess we need a motion to adjourn. Ms. Archer, do I have a seconder? Ms. Richardson, let's say. Okay. All those in favor? I'm there. Thank you. All right. That carries. Thank you, Ms. Scar. You did very well up there. We appreciate it.
Hopefully I'll see you all in person next month. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I was just going to say the next meeting's in the spring. March 23rd. You got to like it.
Thank goodness. Looking forward to spring, that's for sure.
Thanks to everyone, and have a great month.